everybody. Welcome to Knights of Last Call. My name is Derek Linda, and I am joined by Mr. Aaron Smith himself. That's right, William Brandis in the flesh, in person. And who better to have on today, because we are talking 4th edition D&D.
There's a rumor going around that I like this game. So.
There is a rumor going around that you may. In fact, actually, for those of you at home who don't know, William Brandis was the name of your favorite character ever, I would say.
Favorite character ever. I mean, it took the name. So
yeah. And he was a warlord from 4th edition, which we played through from level 1 to 30, because 4th edition goes all the way to 30.
2.5, almost 3 years of campaigning.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, it was about a year per tier. And went all the way to the very end, and had, like, obviously was very kind of Aragorn, King of Men inspired by the end of it. I mean, we were obviously like coming out of that Lord of the Rings era. Oh, yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, that character's iconic. That whole group was iconic.
Yeah, I love that group. Love that character.
Yeah. The Companions of the Veil was the name of the group. But yeah, so
big campaign setting, but already tangenting. So
yeah, already tangenting. So hello and welcome everybody. George Harris says, hello Knights. Hello, George. Abuelo is here for the Tuesday night table gatherings. Absolutely. Full Metal Dragon says, greetings, support D&D 4E, play 4E. I know Full Metal Dragon is a 4E fan. I've seen you in the comments all the time about that. Zach Jennings says, I was going to bet Smith was going to be on this one. We got SC Voldo in the chat saying 4E was fun for sure.
Yes.
What's up now? SC Voldo is our buddy Rich. Rich, who played with us in many campaigns, and in 4th edition had a fantastic dwarf fighter named Glortak, who was pretty sweet as well. There's a rumor that both of you like 4E. Well, yes. I mean, we had a very good time with the edition. But we also had some problems with it. And we definitely went through highs and lows with the edition while we were playing it.
I will say for us, it has aged like fine wine as we matured in our own kind of experiences in role playing.
Yeah. So because I don't think it's during the era. 4th edition came out in 2008. And up until that point, I mean, we had played other games. We had played Earth Dawn. We had played Dragonlance, 5th Age with the Saga system. Which is a pretty kind of narrative explorative game. But for the most part, there really was just the, D&D and then the vampire games, and, on like maybe like GURPS.
Get super into,
Yeah, which we never got super into.
Played a little bit of Masquerade, a little bit of Hunter, but it wasn't really our thing.
Yeah, I don't think we ever played any of the other ones. We just played Vampire and Hunter, which was more my style. But at the time,
Hunter was fun, but
yeah.
We just didn't stick with it long.
But when we got to 4E, I think for me, it was like this interesting development part, because at the same time, I was going to Gen Con and started to play, Dungeon World and all these other games. And so it was like, I was kind of like learning about this stuff at the same time.
This handsome man. Also, this game
we got a couple super chat. We got super chat and got
inspiration in our works.
Oh yeah, Jason B with the $10.
Jason B.
Wow. See, and a lot of people think
that's like your biggest fan.
Yeah, well, a lot of people have this crazy idea that it's like somebody with the Knights or somebody from the Patreon. But I mean, if you look at what Jason says every time, it's like it's very clearly that he works in Paizo, and I think it's hard to imagine.
I mean, look what he's saying here. PF2's got so many elements of 4E in it. Like, yeah, I mean, I could see that. Like,
absolutely.
That's totally fair.
And I think that's one of the things that we want to talk about tonight is that, there are elements of Pathfinder 2 that they, and even 5th edition D&D, which they took from 4th edition D&D. But there's some really good mechanics that they kind of got close to using and then kind of stepped away from. We also got a $5 super chat from Chris Hansen. He said, my voice is my passport. Verify me. Is the name a sneakers reference? Whose name? William Brandis? I don't think that is a sneakers reference. I'm not sure what you mean there, Chris.
I don't know.
Mark says, I've only ever played one game of 4E and I'm willing to give it a try for another one. Let's see. Creative role-playing, a name. Creative, I don't know if you've been part of our chats before, but happy to have you here. Says, I have played D&D since 1978, and I have played every edition, and I had the most fun with 4E. And, I will certainly say that. 4E, it could be frustrating at times because the game was very balanced. And I think that was our big problem with it when we played it when we were kids. When I say kids, we were younger. But it was fun.
I think like a lot of people, we kind of came in there going, "Oh, this is the next version of D&D." And in retrospect, I do believe that to be true. But it was a dramatic difference, and in some good ways, but in ways I think we just didn't appreciate right off the bat.
Absolutely,
it took time for us to get there, and I think a lot of people struggle with that, right?
Yeah. I mean, we were coming
shenanigans and hijinks, right? That's kind of on the altar of sacrifice. We talk about 4E.
I would say it's actually two things. On one side, it's shenanigans and hijinks, which is to say, using your shenanigans and hijinks are always kind of strange. I talked about this on the Blades in the Dark stream, where I kind of poo-pooed and shit on people for
it's a blurry line for sure.
For people for thinking like, oh, like I don't like that there's an engagement roll to determine how well we plan the heist because I want to plan the heist. And it's like, dude, you don't know how to fucking plan a heist. Like you don't know how to, you're just talking out of your ass. And so a lot of times with shenanigans and hijinks, like the players are like, oh, we're going to do this and this and it totally works. Right. And like the GM's like, none of us have any idea how any of this works. We're just totally
confident about Death Spike 2000 though.
We're just making this up as we go along. And so you enter into this, it's still a game. Is what I'm trying to say, right? It's not quite Mother May I, because we've talked about this, right? Shenanigans is sort of like you're trying, but you're making a case, and you're trying. It's almost like you're going to court, and you're trying to like make it so airtight that there's no room for ambiguity. But it's still a game. You're playing a game with the GM, which is, will you believe what I'm, my nonsense? Right. But the other thing is coming into 4th edition. So that's one side where you can basically go, I'm going to ignore the game rules. Here's my bullshit excuse. Give me the win. But on the other side, in coming out of 3E especially, or Pathfinder 1, if you're more familiar with it, is no. We're going to use the mechanics. I just have an AC of 97 and 155,000 hit points, and my attack bonus is plus 78. So nothing can hit me and I can kill everything instantaneously. Right. And it's like, yep, we're playing by the rules.
Yep. Well,
I chose the feats. I picked the magical items, and my character is busted and broken as shit.
And that in particular, I would say far more than shenanigans and hijinks. That is why we got games like a 4E and a PF2.
Right.
What you just described was the direct reasoning behind the redesign that got us PF2.
Exactly.
Which made a better game. And I'm using that term very specifically. It made a better game.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's your favorite RPG, whether or not that's the sort of style of game you like, that is definitely a personal opinion. But when we talk about like game and mechanics and does this function, does it work as written? That worked much better out of the box, because the truth is for 3rd edition Dungeon Master, a PF1 Game Master, you had to have experience, you had to have knowledge, or your game would just fall apart. It would
absolutely. Yeah. Like, I mean, it definitely put a lot of emphasis on you as the GM to be able to adapt to these crazy shenanigans. And the other thing too, is like, there was sort of this weird sort of give and take, because it's like players felt like they wanted to be challenged, despite the fact that they were going out of their way to make these completely, absolutely, ridiculous, broken characters. And so you felt like it was a sort of escalating arms race. Yeah. And so I think 4th edition was an effort. And, we talk about this all the time, but like, I would say of the D&Ds, we talk about this idea of combat as sport versus combat as war. This is nothing that, that is new. People have been talking about this on the interwebs for a while. And the 4E to me really represented D&D for the first time, leaning into this idea of combat as sport, that we were going to make a game out of playing D&D. That D&D was no longer trying to be this like hyper simulationist
Frostjack tipped
game.
$15. 4E is everything I was looking for in a D20 system for a long time. Appreciate
Mr. Frostjack.
Yes,
4E is everything I was looking for in a D20 system for a long time. Appreciate the stream. Well, we're happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Frostjack. Appreciate it. Thank you. So yeah, like, and to be clear, like, when I say combat is sport, I mean like fair and balanced encounter building rules. I mean powers and abilities that don't undermine other characters' abilities. I mean monster abilities that seem fair and reasonable and challenging. I mean, and if you're like, people are like, yeah, and it's like, yeah, okay, well, that's what's in Pathfinder 2. That's what people don't have in 5th edition D&D that they complain about when they go to Pathfinder 2. 4th edition D&D introduced that. It really brought that to the mindset, because while 3E had challenge rating, the fact is you could still have like a CR8 Mind Flayer who had an AoE death stun, you know, or a CR5 or something Medusa that could just, on a failed save, not a critical failed save, on a failed save, petrify your character.
Blown out. Yeah, you know, it's very interesting too, because, you know, and I've seen a couple people in chat talk about how, like, you know, they don't like the MMO references or how it's kind of video gaming. And this is a common thing that you hear about people talking about 4th edition. But when you really go back, and, you know, I know these are 2 of your favorite books.
You're about to show me Races and Classes, Worlds of Monsters.
If you guys, well, first of all, these are just phenomenal books. They're just great books. The way they talk about the world and the way that they talk about how the mechanics tie into the lore, I cannot rate these books high enough. They're some of my all-time favorite books.
Right, they're not rule books. They came out before the edition came out.
Right.
And they basically said, this is what we're thinking about, and this is why we're thinking about it, and this is what we are trying to accomplish with this edition.
It gives you so much insight into what they were trying to do, which I mean, I would love to see that, like, in modern game design, you know, like, and we have the benefit, right, that, like, you know, you're on Mark's channel half the time, right? So we could just be like, literally, Mark, what were you thinking, right? But, like, I just love that these books exist, because when you go, why did they do this? They tell you exactly why they do this, and they walk you through that whole process. And I just love that. But to get back to the point, they came into this, and a lot of people think, oh, they should have called 4th edition D&D Tactics, or they should have made it a different game. That is not at all how these guys looked at it. The designers that worked in 4th edition have been playing it since they were children. They worked on it in 3rd edition. They love this game. They loved it for all the same reasons that all of us growing up loved this game. To them, in their minds, this was the next logical iteration. I think that's such a crucial point. You can disagree with that implementation. That's totally fine. But they weren't trying to make a video game. They were going, we've looked at how this game is played. We look at how people want to play it.
Right.
And we see the flaws of it. So what we want to do is to make this game of heroic and combat action, but remove some of the bad nonsense, not the fun nonsense, but like the 97 armor class and oh, you randomly just get blown up.
Well, not just that, but it's like, you know, they watched, I mean, everyone will tell you that, you know, D&D, as it was, if you look at D&D from the original 1st edition, it was designed as this sort of dungeon exploration game. But the fact is, a lot of people just treated it as a hack and slash combat marathon, right?
Yeah.
And that was true into 1st edition, into 2nd edition. But by the time you got to 3rd edition, you know, your character, it's like, okay, I'm a fighter. I'm a barbarian. I'm a monk. What are you doing on your turn?
Yeah.
Attack.
Everyone's fighting.
Attack. The game
compare the rogue to the thief.
Right. The game shifted. Right. The game shifted towards combat. And so suddenly it's like, okay, well, people are spending a lot of time in combat, and we are still using in 2006 the same combat rules that we used back in 1979, where everything had 5 hit points and basically died instantaneously. You're making a D20 roll. Do you hit? Yes. Roll your damage. That's it. Right. And you know, for some, you know, we talk about in our Patreon server the tyranny of strike in Pathfinder 2nd edition, where a lot of times the best option for you to do is just strike hard, strike. 4th edition came in and said, wow, if that's what people are spending their time doing, which is in combat. And even if you're like, oh, well, we only do like 1 or 2 combats a night. Yeah, but combats take a long time. Yeah. So that might be 2 hours of your 3 or 4 hour session. We should make that part of the game more interesting. We should make that part of the game more dynamic, instead of just being like attack, next round, attack, a flurry attack, which is just 2 attacks. The game was like, let's try to give you more interesting options, because look around at these video games that people are playing. You know, going back to Diablo and all these other games, it's like these people have all these really cool, interesting, awesome, powerful options. And what do we have in D&D? We have strike, base attack, base
exactly.
attack.
And I would say there's another important thing.
I assume you saw the super chat from.
I did see Vin's. Thank you, Vin. I brushed it before we got on the stream. I think there's another important piece in there too, in that early editions especially. It's like, oh, combat starting? Okay, thief, what are you doing? I don't know, hiding, trying not to die. Wizard, what are you doing? I don't know, trying not to die. Fighter, what are you doing? Yes, this is why I'm here, right?
Right.
And so everyone else is kind of sitting down, just taking a break, right? Where by the time, especially you get to 4th, everyone has a defined role, a class fantasy in combat, right?
Yep.
Like you're not just like, oh, I'm the wizard, so I have a terrible attack roll and terrible hit points. No. Now you're the controller, and you have a unique role that plays out completely differently than the way the fighter's playing, and the way the leader is playing, and the way the striker is playing. Yep. And you're part of this team, and you have to contribute. And they persisted that design, I feel, across the whole game, right?
Yeah.
And the easiest implementation of this is obviously skills, but the idea that like in every sort of encounter, no matter what mini game you're playing in D&D, you have the ability to contribute in some way, some meaningful way, and to play it, and you're doing it with your class fantasy.
Right.
And I think that's such a huge thing where, it used to be, hey, it's my turn and I'm in this situation. I'm just going to sit here and take a break and, maybe go get a drink or something. And now you're like, no, I'm engaged because I can always do something. Right. And that's huge. They made it a better game.
Right. Jonka tipped
$5. I've heard that the Star Wars game that came out.
I've heard that the
right
Star Wars
before
game
40
that
was
came out
considered
right
a
before
stealth
40
playtest
was
for 40
considered
by
the
the
stealth
fans.
playtest for
Do you
40
all
by the
agree?
fans. Do you all agree? I think he's talking, is that the Saga edition?
Yeah, Star Wars Saga Edition.
Yeah.
There were elements in there. Like, for example, the condition track in Star Wars Saga Edition basically was the same thing as like the disease track from 4E, which is kind of like the
similar to PF2.
Similar to PF2's track, but it's really it shows up in 5E as the fatigue track.
Oh, yeah, the exhaustion track.
The exhaustion track, yeah. So there were some elements in there. I would think, actually, for me, if you want to see the soft beta test of D&D 4E, it's Tome of Battle. Book of Nine Swords is 100% them saying, here's what D&D with powers looks like. And also Dungeonscape, which was a book to discuss monster roles and encounter design.
I would go so far as say, buy those 2 books if you like the idea of 4E, but you miss your shenanigans, and play that in 3rd edition. You're going to have a great time. And in some ways, I love 4E, but in some ways, in certain cases, Tome of Battle was actually a little bit better in certain cases.
Yeah.
Because they still have the shenanigans in there, and it's just a ton of fun. Tome of Battle is a ton of fun. If you haven't read it or take a look, it's great. And Dungeonscape is phenomenal. I would say, regardless of what you're playing, if you're a game master, get Dungeonscape, because to this day, that book will help you design encounters and dungeons in an extremely interesting way. It will change the way you think about combat, and you can use that in PF2, 5e, whatever you're playing. If it's kind of like a D20 game, that book is phenomenal. It's some of the best advice you can get. Yep.
Well, we got Full Metal Dragon said Book of Nine Swords is my favorite 3.5 book, and Self-Confessed Cynic with a $2 super chat says Tome of Battle is love. It goes without saying that it is easily my favorite 3rd edition book. The classes in that book were incredible designs, and while I do think 4E was an ituration of that,
of course,
I think Tome of Battle was them saying, what happens if we take this to the extreme, right? Like how far up can we tune
4E is like a 7 in terms of power scale. That might be a 10. So.
Yeah, it's pretty up there. I will say this, I mean, unabashedly, and I'm not an anime fan, Book of Nine Swords is the anime book of D&D.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, from the way that it's very much presented as sort of a sort of Eastern Asian influence, martial arts. It's all very much like, the powers are kind of like, no, these aren't magical
schools.
These aren't magical. Okay. You leap 100 feet into the air and then explode in fire. You're like, wait, what? How is this not magical? You're just so sweet. You're just so awesome. Chris Hansen with another super chat says, as a GM, 4E was great. As a player, I felt there were far too many +1s for one round. It needed a VTT, and it showed. I don't disagree with that.
That is a fair criticism. 100%.
That is absolutely a fair criticism.
I will say, if you gotta be in the mood to play 4E, and if you're like, I kind of want to add, I kind of want to play with the fidgets, because there's a lot of fidgety things, particularly when you get higher level.
Yeah.
Don't play 4E that night.
Yeah. Because, specifically, by the way, what what Chris is talking about is in 4E, a lot of times you would see a power that you would use, like an attack, like, maybe like unbalancing strike or something, right? Which is like a fighter power or a champion power, where it says make an attack, you hit, you deal some damage, and then if you deal damage, all of your allies get a +2 power bonus to attack until end of your next turn.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so now this isn't, it's not really a condition, right? It's not something, it's just like, it's a temporary buff that lasts for one round. Now
we get around it pretty elegantly, I think, in that we are big fans of tactiles. I think Derek posted a picture of it on the Discord the other day.
Yeah.
Where we would literally just write the temporary buffs on the tactile so we'd remember. And,
absolutely. But yeah, I'll go a step further.
Fair criticism, though.
It is a criticism, but I'm going to say something, which, Full Metal Dragon says 4E just requires players to actually learn their characters. And Self-Confessed Cynic says floating bonuses were a big problem in 3.52. Agreed. Heck, it's even a problem in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I think we're all just so used to playing on Foundry and having everything get auto-calculated for us. Because there are a lot of conditions in 4E or in Pathfinder 2, and you could stack up a lot of stuff. And by the way, there are what I call phantom conditions in Pathfinder 2. For example, if you hit somebody, and you don't have to go crazy for this, if you hit somebody with a Ray of Frost, and you critically hit them,
the slow debuff,
you get this -10 foot speed penalty for a turn. What is that? That's not a condition. Right, it's this phantom debuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very interesting 4E-ism.
Yeah, it's very much a 4E-ism. So, but to those 2 points, I just want to say, part of this, which I kind of liked, is it kind of required. I talked about this on the Pathfinder 2 stream, where I said why I like reactions is because it makes you have to pay attention.
Yes.
And what's cool about this is I'm the fighter. I hit the monster. Boom, I knock him off balance. Everybody gets a +2 power bonus to attack him until the end of my next turn. Next is the cleric. He's got some healing to do, right? Next is the ranger. She's up. And I go, hey, ranger, attack my target. You get a +2 power bonus to attack. Or the ranger goes, okay, comes over, starts rolling to attack. 17. Did you remember my +2? Oh, 19. Oh, cool, sweet. You hit, right? Like it requires me to sort of step in and say, I'm helping you out. It's one of the reasons I love aid in Pathfinder 2, because it's a great way for me to sort of be more engaged on your turn. But you know what? With aid, if I go, I'm going to prepare to aid, and then I forget to say anything, I just sit back. I'm reading my character sheet.
You're checked out.
I'm checked out. I'm ignoring the battle. Guess what? I look up. The rogue's turn is done, and I missed my opportunity to aid. Like, I don't know. It's kind of on me.
I'll actually take this a step further, because I think this is one of the things that does separate 4E from PF2 a little bit. And 4E had so many of these things. You were tracking your situational modifiers, your auras, the debuffs and the bad guys. There was a lot to go on. And again, fair criticism. It could be overwhelming if you're not in that state of mind. But when you are, this is where you could really have some awesome mastery of the game, and you could apply this stuff. I would go so far to say, they never said this in the design books, but when they did air to some of the math, they were focusing on the later tiers. Heroic was pretty much fine, but Paragon and Epic, levels 11 through 20 and 21 through 30, they went back and changed the math a little bit. My suspicion, honestly, is that there was an expectation that your performance would improve as you played the game. And maybe they're like, okay, people are having a hard time getting to that level, so we're going to tone it back a bit.
Well, we know that's true, because we see that in Pathfinder 2. If you look at the math progression of Pathfinder 2,
100% sure. Yeah.
Like, and Mark has said this, by the way, that like the expectation is that at higher level, you are going to crit more often in Pathfinder 2.
Right.
If you
aren't, to do that,
and to do that, because things are capped, right? You're like, oh, my proficiency went up. Yeah, well, their AC went up. But what scales is things like your ability to debuff, your ability to buff, your ability to aid. All of those things scale.
Yes.
And so if you aren't critting, if you aren't doing those things at higher level Pathfinder 2, you are going through way too many hit points that the game does not expect you to go through. Like, they're not idiots. I mean, yes, maybe knocking people prone on a crit with a hammer is too powerful, but like they are expecting you.
Yes, you got to increase your performance, and you could feel the shift, particularly after 10th level in Pathfinder 2. I see a lot of comments in here, but people, you have to learn your character sheet. It's actually worse than that. You have to learn everyone else's character sheet. And I mean that actually a good way. I don't mean that it's actually worse. I mean, this was a team-oriented game, and you needed to work together as a team to maximize your odds in combat. And this is some of the advice I give when people want to play PF2. PF2 is also an extremely team-oriented game. One of the worst mistakes you can make is making your character in a vacuum, showing up at a table, and just playing and having no regard for your party members. If you want to be good at these games, they're team-based games.
Yeah.
You're whether or not they give you a role or not, the way 4E does, you have a position on your team that you're playing. You have a job to do on that. And the better you understand yours, absolutely, that's important, but also everyone else's, the better your group is going to perform. And 4E, I felt like did this so well, to the point where I remember there was a fight early on in Heroic. It was one of the first times we were playing this game, probably our second or third session. And everyone on the internet was complaining about, I believe his name was Goldtooth. He was
no, he was a goblin.
Was he a goblin?
He's like a goblin barbarian elite that's like 100 hit points. It's like
this is a
Grim Tooth or something.
Fight. Yeah, Grim something. It's a crazy fight. It's in the
keep
first
on the Shadowfells.
Shadowfell. And everyone in there was bitching about this because they were just getting their asses handed to them. And we're like, oh man, we're gonna wipe because Derek is a brutal dungeon master, right? And he's not gonna hold anything back. He's gonna push it to the limit. So what was so great is we went in there and we played and we knew what everyone else was doing at that point. We'd read the book. We were playing some real pros. Shout out to Rich in chat. Like we had a great party. And when you overcame that challenge because you played together, not because your character was a good build, but because you played together as a team, that feeling was so amazing because we knew that fight was bullshit. You even look at the experience, you're like, wait, this is a bullshit fight. What are they doing?
Sure.
When you overcome that with teamwork, that was a great feeling. Yeah. And so I am a huge fan of that because these games are not meant to be like special snowflake, 15 minutes and then someone else's turn. This is a party experience. This is, you're playing with all of your friends together.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, apologies to people in chat. Obviously if you super chat or tip, we're going to talk about what you say. And I know that there's actually a lot of really great conversation being had here. A lot of people are saying some pretty good stuff. Absolutely. And I'll try to get to some of it, but obviously we have our own stuff here to talk about. But so speaking on that, we talked about like, what are some things that we think are missing from the game that actually could be very useful? And I think I think in terms of like party dynamics, I think the idea of roles, is so important to not only 4E but understanding what it is. As you say, what is your job? And for those of you who don't know, if you've played any sort of MMO over the last 25 years, a 4th edition basically said, look, there's each character class can go and do. They can attack, they can move around the battlefield, they can do things. But we are going to call out the fact that there are going to be 4 distinct roles that we want people to fill inside of a combat. And, it goes without saying here, but this was basically fundamentally derived from the classic party, right? Which is the fighter is the defender, the rogue is the striker, the wizard is the controller, and the cleric is the leader, right? Your
this
stereotypical party.
Thing. People are quick to go, oh, this is such a MMOism. No, MMOs, I feel like, streamlined this formula. This formula has existed since the 1970s.
Absolutely. I mean, this is how people were playing the game even back then. Oh, the fireball wizard, that's great. He's got sleep. He's great for taking out like a group of people, but he's weak. He's soft. He needs to be protected. He needs to be, defended. The rogue, coming out with the backstab and eventually 3E, the sneak attack. It's like, they could do a ton of damage, but they don't have that kind of high level sustain. MMOs didn't create that.
Played classic D&D. What's the first question someone asks in character creation? Who's playing the cleric?
Right. Who's playing the cleric? Right. We need somebody who can heal, who can buff us. So the game kind of went out of its way to sort of identify and define these roles. But I think it was more than that. I think that, you know, and we'll talk about monster roles here in a second. But one of the things that I think is really, really important here is understanding is in Pathfinder 2, we have this dilemma, right? Where you have the fighter who is heavily armored, high hit points, has access to some really good defensive feats and abilities, bravery, lots of cool flight, you know. But they're also a really high damage dealer. And you start like looking at that and you go, okay, so they're just good at everything. So what is my job in this party? I don't know, kill things quickly.
Yeah.
Right.
And like PF2, it's more of like, I guess your job is single target damage, right? Like it's much more nebulous.
Right. Because I will say
and I think it can do a disservice, particularly like when you look at something like a Crusader, for example, and this is tangent slightly, but like a Crusader in Pathfinder 2 is very high armor. But if you're playing a sword and board Crusader, you're not doing a lot of damage. So now you're in this difficult position because you want to get hit. You want to protect your party members. You have some reactions that let you do that, but let's call it what it is. The game master isn't going to come after you.
Right.
And you don't have the tools to make him come after you, right? That was the thing. Like 4E was like, hey, listen, if the fighter is going to be the defender in the party, let's give them the tools to do the job.
Right. Because that is the big change, right? That is the big shift. We talked about this before when we talked about the shift from combat as war to combat as sport, okay? If you want the fair game of combat, if you want there to be this, you know, fair, balanced approach to creating monsters and party members who have to, if you want to basically have rules, okay, if you want to have rules about how you're going to play and engage the game, then you need to start thinking about the game more like a game.
Yeah.
More like a sport. Okay.
Yeah,
and just like how
crazy how resistant people are to that.
Right. It is. And like you can't have it both ways. That's what the thing. You can't have it both ways. You can't have your game be this lawless, you know, freewheeling, everything goes, but it's also fair and balanced and we have very strict rules. It like doesn't work that way. Like it just doesn't.
And furthermore, this game has always been a game.
Right.
I mean, you know, we'll get people in here like, oh, it's, you know, we're using game as terms, game as language here. Why are we getting our MMOs into my simulationist game? Can someone explain to me the simulation part of hit points?
Right.
I mean, before the stream, I think you should recap it. Like, what do hit points mean, Derek?
Right.
Is it how much physical punishment my bone structure can take before I die? When I level up, do my bones like get an extra coating of calcium? You know, is that what's going on?
Right. What we do is we understand that hit points are a gamist mechanic that we then subconsciously translate into a approximation of what our character's status is. And I'm willing to bet that when you imagine some character at low hit points, most of the time, you are not imagining someone who looks like they were just flayed alive. You're probably imagining like a boxer at the end of like the first or second round, breathing hard, you know, a couple of cuts, nicks, bruises. Maybe they got, you know, they're looking a little rough, right? So we already understand that hit points are more than just blood and bones. And it's the same thing is true with marks. Like Shawnit says, marks were wonderful and they made tanks actually work as defenders, but they were very hokey, gamey things. Yes.
Yep. Yes, it's a game.
Yes, and the reason why that works, it's the same reason like when in basketball, which is one of the few sports that I actually know some rules about. There is an area right near the basket, and if you're the offensive team, you're not allowed to just stand in that area because that would make scoring too easy. You could just post up and then just say, "Give me the ball" and shoot it in. Right? You only have a few seconds that you can stay inside that area. Before you have to leave again. Now, defenders can stay there, but, offensive players can't. And you're like, oh, that's ruining the game. No, it's making it a game. It's what you want. You want this
basketball as war.
Right. Basketball as war would be you just kicking somebody in the face and then taking a ladder out and climbing to the top of the basket while the rest of your team defends the ladder. And you just sit there and push the basket up and down, or the ball up and down through the basket, scoring points each time. We don't do that because we want an engaging and a fun and a balanced game. when you want to make your combat into something that more resembles a sports game rather than just anything goes, no holds barred, then you need to put in things that are going to be gamist. And I say that it's a challenge on the player to say, well, okay, I appreciate why this is here, but also maybe it's a challenge to me to see, okay, you make sense of this, right? You do it for your hit points all the time. Make sense of this. And there were some things that just people did not want to make sense of.
Like, what is your mark doing, fighter? Like,
right.
Why are they wanting to attack you? Right. And by the way, that's part of the fun, because you go and you read fantasy. Why would Land get in all the fights? Why wouldn't they just focus fire and kill Moraine as fast as possible? Right. You know, like because Land was very threatening. Was he as threatening as Moraine? No, but at the same time, he was threatening enough that people would want to deal with this huge, awesome warrior, you know, on their way to kill the slender, short woman. Right.
Well, the other thing is, and by the way, Chris Hansen with another $5 super chat says, one thing I wish carried over 4E was class composition. Like, let's all make intelligence-based classes, or let's all make divine classes.
Oh, power sources.
Yeah, like really cool. We'll talk about power sources in a minute. But like, Chris, I completely actually agree with you. I think that is actually one of the coolest things.
So thematic, so cool.
Very thematic. But, you know, you're talking about Lan and Moraine, but the other thing is true is realize your game. Oh, by the way, for people who don't know, because so marked was a condition in 4E that usually defenders could give out. Okay, like for example, if you were a fighter, any monster you took a swing at,
don't you have to hit, just swing.
Whether you hit or miss was going to be marked until the end of your next turn. And what that meant is that creature got a -2 to attack anyone but you. So they could attack you at full, you know, with no penalty. But if they wanted to go attack a rogue or go attack your buddy or go attack your wizard, they were going to get a penalty to attack. So what this does is this creates a mechanical incentive for the GM to attack the defender, the fighter. But it's more than that, because for those of you who say that's gamist, I counter and say, we're already playing in a turn-based initiative cyclical system. It is already an inelegant system, because if we got involved in a street fight and people were coming after my little sister and she was behind me, right? I would be, you know, defending her. I'd be getting in front of people.
You wouldn't just stand there as they walked around.
I wouldn't just stand there as they walked around me and just beat her to death. Right. So that is the type of thing that happens all the time. Pathfinder 2, in 3rd edition D&D, like in all these games. 4th edition's marking concept is really just more of a way to express through gamist terminology the idea that, no, this person is doing something that is going to make it hard for them to attack anybody else. They are posting up. They are getting up in their face. Yes. Like, people have such... This is where maybe the tactical mini grid fucks people up, but it's like your fighter isn't just standing in their 5-foot square. You know, This isn't Final Fantasy Tactics where they're like, doop, 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 right? Like, imagine something dynamic and exciting. Well, how did that fighter give him a -2? I don't know. Maybe he ran over. He punched him in the side of the head. He grabbed onto his arm, wrestled him to the ground. It's like, well, how could he do that? He was 5 feet away. It's like, do you really, in your mental image of this battle, is your character really just standing there for 6 seconds and then getting really excited and then standing there for 6 seconds perfectly still? Like, it's actually kind of ridiculous that this is what people, you know, that people think about this. So, you know, I like that 4th edition, you know, because so Sean, it says, the problem with 4E is that they didn't try to make their abilities make sense. Explain what marking was with a fighter using a bow. Easy.
Yeah.
Easy.
Cover. Like what's it called?
Go read Pathfinder 2 and go read about like half of the gunslinger's abilities.
Yeah, it's suppression fire, but like with a bow.
Yep, it's suppression fire with a bow. Right, the character starts to try to you know, go after your wizard buddy. Boom, boom, you're just shooting, and you're like, oh, but he's not actually shooting. Yes, he is. You know, or you've got your bow drawn and you put one right past his ear, and now you've posted up another one, threatening another shot. Yeah, you're distracting him. Yeah, you just got hit with an arrow, or an arrow just whizzed past your head. Guess what? That's going to distract you. And you could say, well, then why doesn't it attract you anytime at arrow? Because it's a game. And that's what we're trying to do.
You guys are playing a game.
That's right.
I know it's going to be shocking to some members in the audience, but this is a game.
Yes. But if they go after the fighter, no cover fire. That's exactly right, Sean, because they're going after the source of the person. Right. No, but also, Sean, realize this. I'm not trying to defend this in the simulation.
Correct. It's a game.
It's a game. It is a gamist mechanic, right? It absolutely is. There's no doubt about that. The issue that, you may have had is that some people, their minds broke and they could not handle that this didn't have a verisimilitude analog to what exactly was going on. Now, never mind that we have non-verisimilitude things all the time. People play Pathfinder 2 every day. They treat somebody with bandages and then they can't touch them again for an hour.
That doesn't even make sense.
And nobody questions it. They go, this is so realistic. Yeah. Wait, why is that realistic? Oh, but I took a feat. Now I can bandage them every 10 minutes. Does that make it better? Why don't I just put more bandages on you? What is stopping me from bandaging you? Nothing. It's a game. The reason why you can't bandage someone instantaneously.
Also, the reason I'm bandaging him is because he took a critical hit to an axe and
if that seems,
but now he's completely fine.
And if that seems unreasonable, don't even try to think about battlefield medicine, right? I can help you in combat, but only once a day, right?
Outside of combat, I can still help you.
Right, but in combat once a day only. Right. And for some odd reason, 4th edition got crucified for this. Yeah. But
it still does. I mean, look at this chat.
Listen, to be clear, it looks like Sean is a 4E fan, but because by the way, I mean, look, there is a world where this does happen. I'm going to draw this battle. Okay. I'm going to draw this very simply as best as I can. All right. So we're playing 4th edition.
I know what this is.
You know what this is?
Yes, this is the Bard.
This is the Bard. Okay.
Yes. Okay. So this is a good example of when gamist fails. This is surges, hit points, marking. That's just open your mind. If you want a criticism about 4E, pay attention.
All right. Here's what happened. So you have a fight. There's a fighter located in the room. However, there is also an illusionary wall, which has been cast by a bard. Okay, these are all part of the same party members. There is, on the other side of the wall, a monster, okay, a foe. Now, because the illusionary wall beat the person's will DC, the foe does not know that the fighter even exists. They've never seen the fighter. They are not.
This was misdirected, Mark.
Yes, I haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, that's right.
The Bard class has an attack, a ranged attack called Misdirected Mark, where they shoot their magical energy at a target. If it hits, it does some psychic damage or mental damage, but it makes them think that one of your allies was like getting in their face and making them mark them. So in this case, the Bard shot the foe with the misdirected mark and then made it so that the fighter was marking the foe, which meant that the foe was being marked by a fighter that he didn't even know existed and couldn't target because the foe couldn't see through the illusionary wall. Now, to be fair, narratively, I can imagine a world where misdirected mark is already doing mental and psychic damage.
This is clearly some sort of enchantment.
It's creating some sort of powerful illusion or hallucination, and they are just envisioning or imagining this fighter that is there but isn't there, and it's giving them destruction. Yeah, Orpheus says it's Schrodinger's foe. Yes,
love it. Yes, exactly.
But here's the thing. Yes, this was probably kind of crazy. But
we did pause the game for a moment to ask ourselves what the hell was going on.
What the hell was going on?
That did happen.
Right. And there are times at any point in time where you go, what is happening? Like, if you ever watch a sports game, I've seen this before, where some weird rules interaction occurs and players are kind of standing around confused, wait, did that really just happen? What happens in this situation? And sometimes one of the other teams knows the rules better, so they run with the ball because through some weird loophole, the play wasn't dead, and so the other team is just sitting there flat-footed. What the hell just happened? This is kind of what happened from this perspective. But this was a classic example of where this went wrong. But going back to roles, I think that the reason I really appreciated roles is because it made it very clear as a player what you were trying to do, and it gave your class focus. Like the designers would design powers, and which were called martial exploits for fighters, or they were called prayers for divine characters, or they were called spells for arcane characters. Arcane. That made you feel like, okay, well, I get what this is doing. I understand the point of this. Like, I could see where this is helping me do my job. Because part of the idea here was you had this job to do. If you were the fighter, it was your job to make sure nobody else got hit. Right?
Team-oriented gameplay.
Right. Jonka with the $2 super chat says, this rule set keeps me from role-playing. The 4E haters. Yeah, that's a whole other thing that we could go off on.
That's a whole rant.
Obviously that is, obviously I know that you're making fun of the 4E haters, but like, I loved the focus of this design. I love that it made you feel like this class isn't trying to be 18 things at once. It's not trying to be defensive and offensive and miscellaneous. It's like, no, this is because I've said this before about Pathfinder 2. I said, look, there are pros and cons to class-based design, but if you're going to fucking do class-based design, then do it. Lean into it. Like,
now, I will say, because some people take that too far and go, oh, there's no, all your builds are the same. They'll say something like that. What the game did, kind of like how PF2 gives you your core chassis, 4E gave you your core job responsibilities, meaning, as a cleric, you did not have to pick your healing power. You got a healing power.
Right.
The fighter always got mark, right?
Yep.
Everything the striker did to damage, right?
Well, I mean, for example, the rogue got sneak attack.
Got sneak attack.
The ranger got hunter's mark or hunter's quarry or whatever.
Yeah. So where you could then branch out is with your powers and feat selection, and you had a ton of customization here.
Sure.
I would say you're not going to trip up on other characters, but you could go pretty far. And like, for example, the way we built William was that he was this leader, but he was a martial power source, and all the power sources also kind of have, they lean into something. Martials lean into damage. Arcane leans into control. So even if you're, playing, if you're a divine controller, you're still going to have some healing.
Right. A great example of this, by the way, is if we look at the core game. All right. So, we were talking about these roles before of defender, striker, controller, leader. But in terms of the power sources, right. You had the martial power source, which meant like, martial arts, martial ability, right. Raw talent. You had arcane, which obviously meant like, the powers of wizardry and magic. And then you had divine, which were the, powers of the gods. And in the core book, you had two defenders. You had the fighter, who obviously represented a sort of a martial leaning. And then you had the paladin, who was your divine defender. And as an example, as you said before, the divine power source, no matter what your role was, kind of leaned into being a leader, right? Yeah. Which meant buffing and healing. As an example, fighters fought, they defended. Paladins defended too, but paladins got abilities that let them heal other characters, which is not something that other defenders could do. Right. That is something that was unique to the paladin, because he wasn't just a defender, he was a divine defender, and that sort of flavored his ability to do that. And as an example to what someone was saying about before, is like for example, if you had a Avenger, which is a divine striker, and then you had an Invoker, which is a divine controller, maybe you don't even need a leader.
Right.
Because
in your all divine party that doesn't have a leader.
Right. Because all of these characters have a certain ability to fill that role a little bit. And I think it actually made these because one thing I also see, by the way, is like people complaining about the classes seeming the same, like the power structure is the same. And this is something we've talked about before, which is like this idea of 4th edition made a decision, which was we are going to use the same progression for everybody's powers. Everybody's going to get a daily at 1st, a daily at 5th. They're going to get a new encounter power at 3rd. They're going to get a utility at 2nd. They made that decision where they said, look, we're not going to make every class unique in terms of its power progression. You're going to get a whole host of feats that you could take that are unique to your class that you can customize that way. You're going to get class features, which are going to be unique to your class. You're going to get a Paragon path, which will be unique to your particular choice. But the fact of the matter is, at level 10, everybody's going to have the same number of powers. Everybody's going to have 2 at wills, 3 or 4 encounter powers, 3 or 4 dailies, and a couple, 4 or 5 utilities.
Yep.
They did that, I think, for 2 reasons. One, balance, right? Part of the idea of this edition is, look, like, we talk about this in Pathfinder 2 all the time. They come up with this edition. Hey, barbarians can rage every fight. Monks get all their key powers or focus powers. Infinite returning. Fighters just fight. They've got medicine, treat wounds. They can heal themselves to full. Spellcasters, Vancian, spell slots. They can run out of power. It's like
they get some focus spells and cantrips, but
they do. But
you're not wrong.
But the game went and made those things weaker. Right? Because they said, oh, those are infinite. And so it's like it puts all the characters on different clocks. Now, that does create some variety and difference of feel. I agree. But when you're trying to make a team game, I think it makes a lot more sense for every character to either have resources or not have resources.
Agreed. Yeah.
And if you're going to have resources, people should have the same resources so that we know what we're talking about here. I just think it makes, I understand that complaint, but I think from a gameplay perspective also, that way you don't have to learn a whole new thing
right
every time you play a different class.
I don't feel it adds to the game having that, and I feel like that criticism is a little weak.
Yeah,
because what makes characters different in 4E is the power choices and the feat selection, which is, to be honest, I feel overwhelming. Actually, by the end of it, there were too many. I got the 4E, the equivalent of like a Aeon for 4E up on here, and let me see, number of feats in this game: 3,271.
Yeah,
okay. Obviously this is broken out by class, but powers 9,409.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Which is really crazy. Classes 77. Paragon paths, which is basically like a mini class, 577. Epic Destinies, 115. Like, that can be an overwhelming number of options.
Yeah, it is. I mean, between the Splat books and Dragon Magazine, which was considered official,
Yeah.
Fasturian, I would agree that the psychic power source probably represented the single greatest deviation, but at the end of the day, it's still linked back to the at-will encounter power, daily, and utility power framework.
Augments are cool.
Yeah, but the augments were really cool. I thought that the roles was something that I thought that I really feel like this just made sense to me, and I know people said it made them feel like a video game, but like, I don't care what edition of D&D you're playing. I don't care if you're playing Pathfinder 2. This is how people talk about the game.
Yeah.
Hey, we're playing D&D. We're playing Pathfinder. What are you making? I'm making like a tank. I'm going to be like a really super defensive champion build. I'm probably going to go Captain America style so I can like grapple foes, and I'll have a really good shield. I'll really, have a lot of reaction. So I'm definitely going tanky. It's like, this is how people talk about the game. So they were just trying to make the game that the way that people were already approaching. What kind of, oh yeah, dude, my character is just support, just heals, buffs. I'm not really worried about offensive spells. I'm just, doom. What is your character? Sick deeps, bro. Like, I want to maximize this. I want to go, psychic investigator, spell strike, imaginary weapon, full Magus DPS. It's like, okay, right? Like, that's how people talk about the game. So why not give them the game terms that match the way that they're thinking about them?
And again, the people who made this game were the people who were playing this game for decades. They were the same people who fell in love with the game the way we did. So this is how they talked about the game.
Yeah. And so again, I think this is something that I think probably, was sort of removed from the game. They kind of got rid of, they walked away from it. And I think the game suffered as a result of it. Now, as much as they suffered from that, they definitely suffered it from the monster rules.
Much worse.
And I think it's actually much worse.
The lack of monster rolls and things like 5e and PF2, I feel fundamentally damaged the game. Yeah. And it's a hard fix to do right without considerable system mastery. Whereas it should have been something that was just built in to right off the bat make engaging encounters. And it's such a simple thing to do in terms of printing and layout. It's more complicated in terms of role design. I will grant that. But even the idea of what is the job of this monster, I think would have greatly helped these games and helped newer game masters learn how to do their craft. Because I will say, being a new game master and picking up 4th edition is probably one of the best and easiest experiences that you can have as a game master, because the game does so much for you so that you can focus on the creative aspects.
And I have this problem a lot, even with Pathfinder 2, where I will look at a monster, I will look at its stat block, and it's not immediately apparent to me
what the hell is it doing?
What the hell this monster is supposed to be doing. And Cuddly Zombie, Hoyrit said monster rolls are awesome. Cuddly Zombie said agree, but then Cuddly Zombie says, I'm convinced Pathfinder 2nd Edition has monster rolls. They're just obscured from the reader to avoid backlash. And I think that's very accurate.
You're 100%. In fact, if you look at the Game Master Guide, it breaks out the different roles that you can give your monsters when you're in the monster builder. So they clearly have this. I think you're completely right. I think this was a layout / presentation decision, not a mechanic.
And let me be clear about something here, because if you go into the monster builder, like from PF2 Easy or whatever Easy Tools, you will see that, and I think maybe it's in the GMG.
No, it's in the GMG.
Yeah, it's in the GMG, where it says this is a soldier, a sniper, a magical striker, right? Like they have these different things. But here's the key. In Pathfinder 2, those are talking about mostly stat lines, right? And to be fair, the roles in 4th edition did decide of stat lines. For example, brutes were going to get a lot more hit points. What do we got here? There we go. Yeah, look at that. So there, base road maps. That's what they were called, right? So brute, magical strike.
Here. Yep.
But here's my problem with it. My problem with it is the base roadmap of stats. It is not the base roadmap of abilities or how things should function. It's not the base roadmap of what is this monster's job. Because, and I was bitching about this today earlier on the Patreon, on the Discord, I said, one thing I have noticed as time has gone on is these games have become more and more about being something that is almost like a piece of art or an expression of the author's creativity instead of a functional, useful game playing aid for people who are playing the game. And like for me as a dungeon master, I want to be able to look at a monster, see its role, go, I get what its job is in this fight. It's a soldier. Its job is to be sticky and stick next to people. It shouldn't be attacking. What are its it has powers, it has abilities that make it do the thing that it is supposed to do. And an example of this, I should say a classic example of this being bad in Pathfinder 2 is, I think it's called the Ogre. What's it called? It's called the Ogre Boss or something. It's not the Ogre Warrior. It's called the Ogre Boss. That's it. Okay. It's a level 7 creature. All right. And it's an ogre. It's an ogre, and it's got a big hook and a javelin, right? Like a big ogre hook, right? So you think, this thing is supposed to go up there and do a bunch of damage. But it also has breastplate and attack of opportunity. So you're kind of like,
so it's a defender?
So it's a defender. But then it has a bellowing command ability, and it can lead and boss people around.
It's a leader.
So it's a leader. So like
the defender boss leader.
It's a defender boss leader. And it's like, so when you look at this monster, you go, I don't know how to use this. Now, obviously it's, it's not like the most complicated thing in the example of the game of the world, but I definitely think I look at this character, I look at this monster, again, it's called the Ogre Boss. It's a level 7 creature. And I go, to me, this is a it's a creature that doesn't know what it's trying to be or what it's trying to do. And yes, maybe it's trying to reflect what an ogre boss would really look like in Golarion. But that's not the way that it's going to be used at your table. At your table, it's going to be a monster that's going to live for 3 to 4 rounds and then die. Like, that's its use. I don't care what its role is in the ecology of Golarion. At your game table, it's going to live and die under 5 rounds.
As an example of the difference between a system that is focused on what it's trying to do and a system that kind of wants to do a little bit of everything. And
thanks, Sean. Appreciate the commentary, Sean. I hope
Sean.
I hope you don't think we were, I wasn't saying like you were wrong or anything like that. I appreciate the criticism, and I agree with most of, if not all of your points. So, but thanks for jumping in.
And we've talked before with people who've written Pathfinder books, and we know that, why is all this fluff in there? Why is there 3 pages of background for this monster that doesn't have dialogue and attacks immediately and fights to the death? And it's because Paizo goes, well, people enjoy reading our books, as in reading it like a novel, right? And people will flip through it and they'll read it, and they may not even play it, right? And they are definitely trying to cater to that market. That's great if you like that. But when I sit down and I want to play a game, I'm a game master. I have limited space at my table. I need things in front of me that are going to be useful. And I compare something like 3 pages of background about a monster that's going to die in 2 rounds to something like this, which each one of these boxes independently is a different monster with everything. And I mean everything, including like there's no flipping the pick out a spell or anything like that. It is everything I need to run that monster effectively at the table.
Absolutely.
And this is an example where, is this pretty? Is this fun to read? I mean, I like the art and I like the layout, but no,
it's a bunch of stat blocks.
It's a bunch of stat blocks. This is a game. It's meant to be run at your table. You're not meant to read this as a novel.
Right.
And for when I'm running a game, which is what I'm doing, I want this. I want the information I need. I want it easy. I want it readable.
The clarity of the monster design, I think, was so important because it meant that even just the way that the stat blocks were presented, like you said, you didn't have to reference anything. I think the biggest L that we took going into 5th edition and Pathfinder 2nd edition is putting fucking spells in monster spell blocks.
100%.
I can't even begin.
It's such a frustrating.
I can't even begin to tell you. I mean, like, I've been playing this game for 30 plus years, and I hate that. Okay, and I probably know Pathfinder 2 better than almost everybody. And I don't know like every single spell was. We just had a fight versus a spellcaster in Abomination Vaults, and this high level occult spellcaster had level 1 spells, level 2 spells, level 3 spells, level 4 spells, a bunch of them, right? Maybe 20 spells in total. And it's his monster's turn, and I want to cast a spell. Okay, number 1, do I know what every single one of these spells do? Number 2, if I do know what they do I know the range? Do I know how many targets? Right? I could see that the range between my spellcaster and the party was, 30 or like 40 feet. So I was like, which of these spells has a range that is even greater than 30 feet? If we knew, okay, all spells are range 30 feet, right? Like that would be something. But no, some spells are randomly 60,
120, 500,
120,
60.
500, right? Like they're all over the place. And there's no way to tell that from the book or the description or anything like that. So what are you going to do? Just flip through the whole thing? And then Festurian as a great example as well. If you look at a 4th edition monster, it's going to have like 2 to 3 things that it can do because it's probably going to live 2 to 3 rounds.
Yep.
Right. And, some monsters might have an ability that recharges, once during the fight. So it's like, it gets to do that ability twice. But why are we putting all these spells onto a monster if it's not even going to use it? And all I'm trying to say is maybe it's different at your table. But I'm going to willingly bet that at most people's table around the world, the monsters that you're pulling out of the bestiary are being used to be put into a combat encounter. And the party's going to fight them. And they're going to fight them till they're at 0 hit points. And you're going to rule that they're dead. And they're going to fight them in probably 3, 4, 5 combat rounds. And then they're going to be dead and you're going to be moving on. So that means that the point of that monster in your game is to be a foe that lives and dies. And so why not give me the tools that I need to do that? And now you might say, well, isn't that other stuff good? Yeah, maybe it is. But don't give it to me by making the other part of that worse, the thing that I'm doing all the time, the thing that the majority of people are doing. It's like
the thing that you're pressed for time and pressed for space and pressed for attention span. Like game mastering PF2 is a challenge because there's a ton you got to remember, and it makes it so much harder when you're flipping through trying to find the thing, because people already complain all these fights take too long. Well, if I have to look up a spell every turn, it's going to take a hell of a lot longer.
Yeah, and Shadram in chat says, I never give my monster spells now. I just create abilities that mimic spells, but usually simplified. Now, Shadram, you're absolutely right. And in fact, at the end of Northern Reaches, when I designed Triune, the final battle boss, I did not really use spells. I use a bunch of custom abilities. The problem that you run into is that the rest of the game is designed to operate on the basis that these monsters are casting spells, because you have feats like counterspell, and you have skill feats like quick identify, or whatever it's called, identify spell or whatever. The idea of the game is, yes, these people are supposed to be casting spells, but the fact of the matter is, I don't think that monsters and players have to operate on the same rules. Pathfinder 2 took a good step towards, third edition was the worst, right? Third edition monsters were literally built like characters. Right. Every 3 hit dice, you got a feat. They had base attack bonus. They got skill points you had to spend. Like, they were essentially character classes.
And you had to follow the rules too. Like, if you were a writer for third edition, you had to follow this system to build your monster.
John,
getting to the thing you wanted to do was a challenge.
Jonka says counterspell in Pathfinder 2 sucks anyways. Well, Jonka, wait until combat and tactics versus spellcasters drops, and I believe it is in the Patreon bonus content, where we talk about some unbelievable OP strategies for making sure that spellcasting is never relevant in your game ever again. And
to be honest, that video was made so long ago, I don't even remember what we talked about.
That it'll be a surprise to you too.
I'll have to watch it. Be like, oh, this is good.
Wow. You're like, oh, wow.
Good. I'm playing a spellcaster. This is really useful.
You are playing a spellcaster now. That is actually true. Anyways, so let's Damien says August 22. No, much sooner than that. It's actually edited, Damien.
He's been working on the editing.
Yeah, it is edited. I just have to add some graphics, because at some points during the course of our conversation, we talk about like Smith will be an asshole and be like, Derek can put up on screen right now this chart that I'm talking about. I'm like, damn it, Smith. Now I gotta go and I gotta add a graphic to the thing.
Sorry.
It's all right. Flint with a $5 super chat. Hey, Flint, good to see you, buddy. Flint says, if a bunch of Gen Y teens showed up at your 4E table, they only know 5th edition, how would you explain or sell them on 5E or 4E? So the first thing to realize, and we talk about this, again, this isn't technically the point of this stream, but we're talking 4th edition. 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons, like 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, like Pathfinder 2, has a robust combat system, and then it has a skill system where you indicate which ones you're proficient in or you're not proficient in. You add your stat, strength for athletics, dexterity for stealth. You make a roll, you beat a DC, you succeed. You don't meet the DC, you fail. 4th edition D&D has the exact same set of resolution mechanics as any other edition of D&D or Pathfinder 2.
At least since third.
Since third. Yeah. You get feats, you get combat powers, right? You get skills. You get some stuff from your race, ancestry. You get some stuff from your class. And that's the game. You get magic items. So there is nothing about 4E that makes it any worse or any better than any other version of D&D at doing any of the things that D&D does.
And in fact, even if you flip into like the adventure chapter, 5e or 3rd edition, and you start looking at things like penalty on perception because someone's far away or because of darkness, or how many miles does it take to travel through mountains or forest, that's all in 4e too.
Yeah. It doesn't, it's not like, nope, there is no world. It just goes from combat to combat. It's a combat sim, like you're playing some weird video game so I guess my respect is I would just say, hey, this is a D&D game. It's a fantasy adventure game. Yeah. The only thing I would do if I had to sell them on it is say, but in this game, combat has a little bit more excitement and a little bit more focus, because you're going to have cool and interesting abilities that your character has that are going to be relevant so that when you're in combat, if you've been playing 5e, you're like, that you're a fighter. You just, attack, multi-attack, attack, multi-attack, attack. Oh, you've got power attack, great weapon mastery or whatever. Do that, attack. You just do that over and over and over again. But if you think that classes like, what is it, the combat master, the combat, whatever, the one fighter subclass.
Oh, the subclass, the
battle master.
Master something.
If you like that design of the fighter better because you like being able to make these kind of cool, interesting choices, then this is that 4E is what does that. And so that'll make that a little bit more exciting and a little bit more rewarding in terms of decision making. But I actually wouldn't try to sell it any differently, Flint. I would just try to say it's just D&D, because at the end of the day, if you don't like mostly combat-focused adventure game that has a fairly weak skill system implementation and has a lot of mechanical abilities that are pretty much related to combat, then you shouldn't be playing D&D pretty much anywhere, period. Like, I don't care if it
is an exploration, combat-heavy, heroic adventure game.
And
it's got rules for travel, dungeons, darkness, fighting, spells, and very, very limited narrative stuff.
Yep.
Narrative is the way that,
Powered
by the Apocalypse.
If your players are resistant to
I was like, we got a tip here from
to
Jim
play
Scott,
it because it's stupid, just trick them into playing 13th
If your players are resistant to
has some
4E and
elements
refuse to
inspired
play
by
it because
4E.
it's stupid, just trick them into playing 13th Age. It has some elements inspired by 4E. Bestiary especially. Yeah, I mean, 13th Age is, first of all, it's a phenomenal game, and it is a great 4E icebreaker, I would say. It's also a great way to it's a great gateway to get them into non-D20 games, in my opinion. You can expose some really cool elements that you see more in a Powered by the Apocalypse game, and get them hooked on that. So
yeah, no, I definitely agree with Jim Scott. I think 13th Age is a fantastic game, and it is a great gateway into not just 4th edition, if that's what you want to play. Because to be clear, 13th Age doesn't really have that super tactical combat, right? It's kind of more generic, and it introduces the idea of the powers and the power structure, and the idea that all of the classes are sort of operating on a resource-based mechanic. By the way, I just want to bitch again.
That's your channel. You can do whatever you want.
Why is it that for years and years and years, and in 5th edition, this is true, and in 3rd edition, it was true, and in Pathfinder 1, it was true, barbarians had X rages per day.
Right. I can only get angry twice a day.
I can only get angry twice a day. Now I can get angry.
If I'm a little bit healthier, I can get angry 3 times a day.
Right. I've leveled up. I'm now, I can.
No. Because I think it's isn't it Rage plus Con or something?
Well,
in one of the editions? I don't know.
No.
Okay. No, I'm thinking rounds. Not rounds. Doesn't matter.
Rounds. Yeah. That's
whatever. It's all nonsense. What the hell does this even mean?
Right. My point is, it's that was always X times per day.
Right.
And people were just, and there was nothing magical about it. It was just angry. And people went, yeah, that's sweet.
I mean, at least you could say your god's being a dick because he's only going to give you that one lay on hands for today, but what's going on with the barbarian here? I don't got it in me. Can't be mad.
Or like I said, battlefield medicine. I honestly have never seen anyone ever complain about battlefield medicine in Pathfinder 2nd edition, where you can only use it once a day. It's just crazy.
What's hilarious about PF2 design too is
that's the secret, Derek.
What do we got?
I'm always angry.
GM Scott says that's the secret, Derek. I'm always angry.
Always angry. Yeah, that's great. But as you got further along in the PF2 design, you got into Dark Archives. Look at what they did with was it the Thaumaturge?
The Thaumaturge, yeah.
Yeah, read their powers and how they work. Their super recall knowledge is keyed off charisma. They don't even bother to explain it.
Yeah, the Thaumaturge is the most 4E inspired Pathfinder 2 class 100%. Design. And I would say, I honestly, so is the Psychic to a certain extent.
Yeah, but it's unapologetic in its gamist design, which is great, by the way.
Right. Thaumaturge is a charisma-based class that needs this skill to work. So they give you esoteric lore, and somehow it's tied to charisma.
Right. Your force of will.
I know a lot. I'm very personable. So that's why I know so much about all these different monsters. It doesn't make any sense. Why does it do that? Because that's how the fucking game has to work. Because
otherwise the class wouldn't work.
So it's very strange to me that people always have these, sort of problems.
Weird hills to die on, of all things. I don't know. Yeah. I think it's just popular that the shit on 4E.
Self-confessed cynic with $5 super chat says, let's be real about how to convince your 5e group. I just tell them 4E is like 5e if you mixed in cool abilities from Diablo and made the combat a bit more balanced. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of actually accurate.
Accurate. I think Diablo was a stronger influence on 4E than some MMOs, to be honest.
I actually 100% agree with that. In fact, when I see 4E, a lot of times I see Diablo 2 more than anything else. I think if
you look at the time and when they were designing the game, the core design was done pretty early before things like WoW even really were released.
Yeah. Also, you know what? Creative Role Playing said 4th edition was excellent in combat, but it also introduced things like skill challenges, which were great for role playing. And you know what? Creative role playing, you're absolutely correct, because you know what? For all the people that say, like, okay, so in 4E, right? Okay, you have a robust combat system. Okay, well, guess what? I don't know if you've read 3rd edition D&D, but it has a robust combat system as well. And you know what? So does 5th edition, to be honest with you. It's pretty, tactical, a lot of stuff going on, tax opportunity, the whole thing. And then it has this skill system that's kind of just thrown on there. Make a check versus a DC. Does it work? Yeah, sure. But only 4th edition was like, hey, you know what? Maybe there is more to do than just combat. Let's actually speak about and let's dive into this idea of skill challenge. Let's create a mechanical system for non-combat encounters, because we want to give that focus and emphasis, and we want to allow other parts of the game to shine and soar. You didn't really see any game system do anything with this until Pathfinder 2nd edition in the Game Mastery Guide had their victory point subsystems.
Which is a skill challenge.
Yeah. So, which is a skill challenge. It's just a skill challenge. And so, I mean, I think that in some ways 4E was the best non-combat D&D system.
Great.
Because it had everything else that all the other systems had.
Yep.
And on top of that, like Pathfinder 2, it had rituals.
Which are also awesome.
Which are a non-slot-based, non-resource-based system that your casters, or anyone who really took the feat, could use to produce magical effects.
And, there's certainly not the level 3rd edition, but you can get some shenanigans with rituals.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Self-confessed cynic with a $5 super chat says, I'll be running a game for complete newbies. They've never rolled dice before. In a few weeks, 4E or 5 Torches Deep. I can make either work. Which one? That's a great question.
2 very different games.
Those are 2 very, very different games. I mean, there's no doubt to me that 4E is more of the action superhero. And at 4E at level 1, your character is going to have 1 encounter power, 2 at wills, and a daily power. So basically they're going to have a once per day, be a badass, cool, awesome power. They're going to have their basic attacks, and then they're going to have once a fight where they can do something cool. And they are going to have a lot of hit points, and they're going to be very durable. In 5 Torches Deep, you have to roll just to cast a spell.
Yep.
And so you might go, I'm going to cast my spell. Oh, I failed the roll. Oh, okay. Well, I guess I did nothing that round, and I'm dead. So
and we're friends. We've known each other for a bit now. I like to think I know you decently well. Here's my advice. I think, honestly, players aside, I think you're going to get bored with 5 Torches Deep. And I say that because Derek and I get bored of games like BX, and that's really what that game is trying to emulate.
Sure.
And Ben likes the anime. He likes the power. I'm not saying he wouldn't enjoy a game like that every now and then, but a campaign, I think you're gonna miss that. And I just say this as a word of caution, because I too try to run a grimdark 5e game, and it quickly turned by about level 4 into Final Fantasy 14.
Okay, so let me be clear about this. Let me be clear about this. We played a 5e game that started off. Aaron was really inspired by Darkest Dungeon, right? The side-scrolling kind of grim dark.
It's the video game version of
Torchbearer. Right. Everyone knows that game, Darkest Dungeon, right? Where the bell tolls for sanity. What horrors await in man? That one. Yeah. And Aaron's like, okay, guys, this is a really grim, dark game. You're going to the dungeon. We're going to be tracking torches. Your characters are going to be getting diseases. You're going to have to regain not only your mental aptitude, and it's going to be really, really gritty. And then by level 6 or 7 in that campaign, my character was a bard, had unlocked his 5th mental chakra, and now had a floating gem that he could use to like cast all his bard spells as a wizard while flying through the air and using his inspiration die to cause Muso attacks. And we literally had Final Fantasy Ultimates, which, by the way, were powered by our charges of inspiration, which each of us could build up to 3 charges of inspiration, and then we could cash them in to do ultimate attacks. So that is what Aaron happened when he tried to do a grimdark low fantasy game.
That campaign ended in space.
It did. It ended in, well, okay, that campaign ended. Number 1, we fought, I think, 100 Baylors. And then I think we killed them all instantaneously.
Yes.
Then
the Baylors were trash.
Okay, they were trash. I think they were just like in the background. Then we fought several Solars.
There were some Solars. Yeah.
Then we fought a Tarrasque Q.
Right. And then
a second one. In the middle of that one, a second one showed up from a different alternate dimension. So we had to fight 2 Tarrasques. And then we fought literally called Chaos. And it was a 9,999 hit point mega boss fought in space like an MMO raid. So that was literally
they had stack and spread mechanics and everything like that.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So Jonka had a $5 super chat. Jonka says exploration almost always leads into combat. It's a video game. You mean just like 3E and 5E? Yep. I mean, Jonka, you're absolutely correct.
And first and second and basic.
There are pillars to this game. There is a social pillar, there is an exploration pillar, and there is a combat pillar. And I think D&D is at its worst when people just focus on the combat pillar. I think those other elements are important. Aaron, we just played Abomination Vaults, Pathfinder 2. We're having a great time. We're playing, it's our Friday night game.
Great campaign.
Right. We just played a Friday for about 5 hours, and give or take. And we probably spent an hour of that bullshitting, like we usually do. So we probably played for a good 4 hours. And in that, we explored level 5 of the Abomination Vaults. And you all probably got into 3 or 4 fights. But also, between those fights, there was creeping around through the corridors, examining rooms, looking for clues. What are these strange lockpicking? What are these strange mushroom spores? Should we go south or should we go east? What do we hear to the east, right? Those things act as this really good pacing mechanism that is so important to games. Again, dungeons aren't just a good practical design. They're also a good pacing mechanism because they allow the tension to build because players don't know what's in that next room. And so there's that fear of the unknown. And so when the combat happens, it's almost like a release because you go, okay, yeah, it was something bad. We know what it is now, and we're fighting it.
Now we're fighting it.
Yeah. And then we beat it, and you get that great high of endorphins of, we defeated it. And you get to explore the treasure, the room, and kind of learn its secrets. And you feel like you earned that exploration. And so, I completely agree with Jonka, right? Like that play pattern is great, and it is what they did in 3rd edition, and it is what they did in 5th edition to the right point.
I'm playing a badass sorcerer that can throw fireballs. Of course I want to get in the combat.
Right.
And guess what? If I was playing a badass barbarian who had a rage every round because of action tax, I would still want to get in the combat. That's the only thing I could do.
And I agree that Pathfinder 2, look, there are a lot of options and different ways to build your classes. But for the most part, if you look at your class and you look at the features it gives you and you look at the feat options it gives you, all right, it's like, it's trying to tell you here, your character is designed to kick ass and take names, right?
Yes.
Like the feat is called dangerous sorcery, like it's clearly saying something here. Self-confessed cynic with a $2 super chat says all good campaigns end in space. I will stand by that. Michelle Elliott says just signed up as champion. Holla. We're good.
Welcome.
I am strong.
Well, thank you. Whichever.
Very strong. KOLC is awesome. Learning so much. How do I change my name here to be something cool? How do you change your YouTube name profile?
You just go into your username and change it.
Yeah, through YouTube.
Yeah, that's not something we can do. You can manage it through your account. And you might have to change it in your channel. It's kind of a mess. I don't know. It wasn't very intuitive.
Yeah, I know people do it here sometimes, but I think you go into your YouTube settings and you have to change like your user account name or something.
Now, if you want a cool color and a cool little icon, you can sign up as an adventurer on this channel. because you're a patron, I wouldn't recommend it because you're already supporting the channel. Right. Thank you for doing that, by the way.
Right. All these people
want to support twice, but they're bad at making decisions.
All these people with blue badges next to their names are people who not only are giving us money one way, they're also giving us money a different way.
Right. Same with the green. So
yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah. Right now,
some of the blue are mods. So
yeah. Right. So they work for us and they give us money. Thanks, Damien. Self-confessed cynic, Damian Williams says 4E sucks so bad that Advanced 5E made their better version of 5E by just taking its stuff from 4E and Book of Nine Swords. That game was great. Just grognards now have just have the internet to bitch. Yeah, like the problem with 4E.
I gotta ask Damon, are you getting like paid by the A5E guys? Because you talk about that game the way I talk about 4E. So I'm just curious. It's cool, bro. If you are,
I mean, because
I wish I was. But.
So there's a lot of things from 4th edition that got carried over. You know, people like Advantage was a mechanic that came out in 4th edition for the Avengers. So I want to talk about something though that I think is missing, and I know that this is something that's really important. Now, to believe it or not, 5th edition included this, but they did it badly. So one of the things I want to talk about, as we sort of, kind of maybe start to wind down the conversation, is healing surges. And for those of you who don't know what a healing surge is, in 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons, your character class, depending on what kind of class you were, like if you were a big, strong fighter versus, let's say, a wizard. We got humans, we got tieflings, we got classes. Here we go. All right. So we have, Jesus Christ. All right, cleric. So you can see here in our cleric that they have healing surges per day, 7 plus constitution modifier. Now note, that is not tied to your level or anything else. That means that unless your constitution modifier goes up, if you raise your constitution, you're pretty much going to have probably 8 to 9 healing surges per day. Whereas a class like the fighter, right, you can see here has 9 plus their constitution modifier per day. So a fighter might have 10 or 11 or 12 healing surges in a given day.
Because they're also going to have a pretty good con too.
Because they're also going to have a pretty good con. So how does healing surges work? Well, the first thing is your character has hit points. Okay. Maybe they have 30 hit points, or maybe they have 50 hit points, or maybe they have 100 hit points. They have a bunch of different hit point values. You have a value, which is called your healing surge value. And that is equal to 25% of your character's maximum HP. So in the instance of a character whose max HP was 100, their healing surge value is 25. And that means that our fighter, with their 10, let's say, healing surges, they probably would have more than this, they can heal themselves 10 times a day for 25 hit points. So they can heal themselves for 250 hit points, which is 250% of their max HP. Now, this mechanic pretty much made its way into 5th edition as hit dice. Mm-hmm. Because hit dice it's not quite going to let you heal the full 2.5 times a day.
No.
But, you can rest, take a short rest, not a long rest, not overnight, not 8 hours. You can take a short rest, and you can then spend some of your hit dice to get your hit points back. Now, to be clear, even if your character was at 1 hit point, if you spent 4 healing surges, you'd be at full. So obviously, spending 4 hit dice now in 5e, you get more hit dice as you go higher in level, right, but they heal proportionally less and less and less of your total hit points, so you need to spend more of them.
Right.
But here's the biggest problem. Here's the distinction. Here's the biggest problem that I have with 5e versus 4e. In 5e, a short rest is 1 hour. And in 4e, a short rest is 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Now, to be fair, 5e does have the variant rule called heroic mode, where it makes the short rest 5 minutes and the long rest 1 day. But by default, because it's an hour. Yeah.
Right. Because they included that from 4th edition because they were like, oh, this is so sweet and awesome. Because the whole advantage of this is to get away from the reliance that you have of, hey, the fight is over. We're playing a heroic action, game. Like this mechanic is trying to get you away from dungeon exploration where everything's moving at a snail's pace, right? Jonka says $5. Healing surges are great for dramatic tension. Great mechanic, and the similar mechanic, resonance, should have been included in Pathfinder 2. Fight me. Not going to, because I think you're absolutely right.
Yep.
And again, the beauty of this, because even in Pathfinder 2, because again, if we're talking about, like, if we go back to basic D&D, Smith, right? The game even said, after a fight was over, you had to spend 1 turn, which was 10 minutes,
resting
and recovering and catching your breath. So even a quick several round fight would basically take 10 minutes because the idea was, you're pretty tired after that. And in those games, your characters might move 100 feet in a turn. That's 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. That means in 10 minutes, your character moved 100 feet through the dungeon. Right. Whereas in Pathfinder 2 and 5th edition, you basically just move at full speed. Right. Maybe at most you're moving at like half speed because you're doing something else, but your characters are moving very quickly. And the old school games had that sort of grindy, feel to it. But the newer games, they've moved away from the gritty dungeon crawl, and now it's more of that heroic action fantasy.
Yeah.
But yet in Pathfinder 2 and 5th edition, you have a combat and it's like, let's go spend an hour.
Right. Let's just spend an hour resting so I can roll my 1d8 hit points.
Right. And also
still have to go back to town when that doesn't heal enough.
How is that exciting? It has a treat. And you know what? Here, I'm going to go to the poll because I need to know this. Has a treat wounds check in your Pathfinder 2 game ever been exciting? Right? Like, it's like, after the fight is over, it's like, okay, well, we spend an hour. It's like, okay, what's your hit die fighter? D10 in 5th edition. All right, well, I'm going to spend 1. I guess I'm going to spend another one. I guess I'm going to spend another one. I guess I'm going to spend another one. And you're just rolling these dice for no particular reason. And we see this all the time in Pathfinder 2. It's like, the fight's over. Okay, I'm going to treat wounds. Okay, I've got ward medic, so I'll treat both of us. You're going to go trained or you're going to go expert? Oh, I'll go expert. Okay, cool.
By 3rd or 4th level, once you feel you have paid sufficient feats into medicine, the players and GMs just go, oh, you got medicine? Okay, you're back to full 10 minutes. It's fine.
Right.
Let's move on. No one cares.
I think
it's a newbie tax.
I think everybody ends up hand waving. I think everybody ends up hand waving that.
Yeah, well, in PF2, you're expected, just like in 4th edition, at least 5th edition, it's a little bit more arbitrary. But in PF2 and 4th edition, you're expected to be at full or near full every encounter. That's what it's balanced against. And so we know this in PF2. What are we doing? Why are we going through the semantics of this? Why is this a punishment for being level 1? Because that's really where the medicine check is at the highest risk.
Right. By the way,
flat DCs.
82% of people said no. Treat wounds has never been exciting.
And one person said yes, had the guy who wasn't proficient make the check or whatever.
Right, and they were bleeding out and they were dying free.
Oh, this is so exciting.
Yeah, and that can happen. But the key thing here though is what we're kind of really getting to here though is in a game like Pathfinder 2, you have this weird condition where you can attack a character's hit points through spells and damage. Mm-hmm. But then once the encounter is over, those hit points go to full.
Yep. No attrition.
And this was, by the way, an important concept. This is, by the way, I would argue that this was true in 4th edition as well, Smith, which is, we got a super chat. I feel like everybody ends up hand waving all of Pathfinder 2nd edition.
Yeah.
Sometimes
I would not oppose that bet.
Yeah, I mean that's probably a very safe bet. Damien says, continual recovery, ward medic, and insurance, and then you never have to make the check again. Right, but why though? Like, are we just taking those skill feats just so we don't have to be hassled Just so that
at least you got something to spend your skill feats on. So there's that.
That is very true. But like, what this means is that you can attack a character's hit points, but once the encounter's over, the hit points go to full. But also, we've discussed this before. People are playing Pathfinder 2 because they want this fair and this balanced game. And part of the problem that people had with older editions of the game, including 3rd edition, was that it was hard to balance a creature's challenge rating, because if you fought a CR5 troll when your party was fresh out the block, full hit points, full spells,
smoke it.
But if you came and fought that troll at the end of the day, the fighter, the fighter is entering the fight at 50% hit points.
Yeah.
The wizard is out of their fireballs, or out of their scorching rays. The cleric only has a cure light wounds left. That is a very different fight.
Yeah.
And it means that the variance is going to be higher. And what players have told people again and again is like, they don't want that. They want to be able to know that this fight is this hard. And so with 4th edition and Pathfinder 2nd edition, they had this idea of, well, the only way we can do that to make the game, to make the sport better, is to kind of go in there with the assumption that, yes, everyone is going to be at full at the start of a fight. And that hit points are going to be a resource that really only matters in the encounter.
Yep.
Now, I think that's fine. And it makes it's a different type of gameplay. But what 4E did, so what 4E does is it says you're going to have full hit points in a fight. And then when the fight's over, your hit points are going to be low, and you're going to have to spend some of your healing surges to get your hit points back to full. And then the next fight, they're going to be at full. And then you're going to spend some healing surges, and then they're going to be at full until you run out of healing surges.
And now you're in trouble.
And now
this
you're
is
in
what
trouble.
This game did so well that I do think PF2 struggles with. It had short encounter or short resources and long-term resources.
Right. And
short-term gave you high tension in the combat because those hit points would get low fast, and you're like, I'm going to die.
Yep.
But in the back of your mind, when you're exploring and you're in a fight and you're like, should I use this or not? You're going, but I'm running out of healing surges.
Right.
And we're pretty deep in, and we have to get ourselves out of this. Do I have enough to make it? Which is good. That's good tension.
Right. So you mentioned short and long, right? Like if you look at resources in 4th edition, you have, like you said, so you have these short term, and then you have the long-term resources. And like that is true across so much of the game. That's because you have hit points as a short-term research, but then your healing surges are your long-term research. And in the short term, you have things like your encounter powers.
Yep. And then you have your dailies.
And then on the long term, you have your dailies.
You have your encounter magic items.
Right.
You have your daily magic item uses.
Right. You have magical items that, you kind of have your weak magic items that you can kind of use, multiple times per day in every fight. And then you have your strong magic items, which can only be used once per day and require you to use some of your uses. And, kind of in between, you have action points.
Right.
Which are
action points was a little bit more of the carrot, right? Like, so not only you have the stick of running out of your resources, but as you got milestones, which were typically every 2 encounters, you would get action points. You would get additional daily magic item uses. Right. The game would encourage you to go further, right? Higher levels, you get rings. The way the ring mechanic worked is they were tied to milestones. Your ring got better the longer that you played the game. So you had 2 incentives, right? Like you had some resources to get through today, so you didn't have to run back to town, and you got rewarded for playing longer. And what ended up happening is this built a great strategic desire in the game to really emphasize the class use, right? Because if you're in a fight, who do you want to get hit?
Right.
You want the defender to get hit because they are going to heal the most efficiently. Who do you want to heal the defender? The leader. Sorry, go ahead. I get excited about this.
No. I think this is something that people don't understand because, by the way, the core crux of this is I think Pathfinder 2 has eliminated the long-term resource game from their system, except for Vancian spell slot casting, which is inexplicably still there.
Which at this point just feels like a penalty.
And what it means is that you can deplete a character's hit points in Pathfinder 2, but you do not have any other levers to weigh on them that will cause them to feel like this tension is built. You could make them enfeebled or diseased or clumsy, but because of the game's math and because of the game's balance, those are actually really, really punitive. Those are actually really, really, really painful. The only option, which we see get used all the time, Smith, we use it all the time, is doomed. Because the closest thing that you get to a healing surge, kind of, in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, is the doomed condition. Because it's a way that you can represent sort of this growing tension of this diminishing resource.
Without breaking the math.
But without fucking up the math of the game by giving them a bunch of penalties that'll make it a death spiral. Because now they're more likely to fail the next encounter because they're enfeebled 3. Or because they're frightened 4 or whatever.
And now you've created a death spiral in your perfectly balanced game, which some of you might be like, that sounds cool. What are we doing though?
Right.
If you're playing this game, you're playing it for this balanced experience.
Exactly.
I'm not saying it needs to be balanced every single time, but in general, that's what the goal is. The goal is that these are balanced encounters.
But the other thing, and I think this is what you're getting at, Smith, which I think is really, really important, is, you know, obviously because remember, once a character's out of healing surges, they can no longer be healed.
Right.
Short of some very specific, very rare powers, usually daily powers, right? That almost always involve magic. Even if a cleric uses healing, healing on you, you need to have healing surges. It's a tension mechanic, but it's also a great strategic resource because if you have a fighter who has 200 hit points, then, as we said before, their healing surge value is 50. It's 25% of their max hit points. And then let's say you have a wizard who has 100 hit points. Well, their healing surge value is going to be 25. What this means right now in Pathfinder 2, if I have a 150 hit point fighter and a 100 hit point wizard, and they take 90 damage, then after the fight, it's going to take the exact same amount of resources in order to heal them back up to full. In fact, a cleric's healing spell that heals for 90 points of damage is going to do just as much to heal the fighter as it is going to heal the wizard. But in this situation, in 4th edition, where the healing surge value of the fighter is doubled, it means that if the enemies dealt 50 damage to the party, but you as a group made it so that 50 damage went onto the fighter, then after the fight is over, the fighter only has to spend 1 of their healing surges. Whereas if the 50 damage were to go onto your 100 hit point wizard, who has a 25 hit point healing surge value, that wizard is going to have to spend 2 healing surges. Oh, and by the way, our 200 hit point fighter might have 13 healing surges.
Right.
And our wizard might have
9,
8,
8, 9, yeah.
So they don't even have that many to work with. And so what it means is it's, as a party, you feel rewarded for making sure that the characters who are supposed to be taking a lot of damage are taking a lot of damage. And it's not just lip service. Your party is playing better. You are going to be able to accomplish more. You are going to be able to go further, go longer, accomplish more in your game. And that is supposed to feel very rewarding.
Yeah, that's playing the game well. And it starts here with this, but then let's say that fighter does get tore up. They have to use multiple healing surges. Well, maybe they still only have to use 1 because it's the leader that's now granting them a heal from one of their powers, and leaders really amplify heals. So the fighter isn't just taking a second win. The fighter got a big heal from the cleric, which was effectively an extra free surge. Yep. But the cleric can't constantly spend all these heals. They're limited. They're encounter-based. Sometimes they're daily-based. So you can't take forever in this fight. But these monsters are doing a lot of damage. What do? You got to melt them. So your strikers got to be bringing these guys down as fast as possible. Right. But they can't bring them down as fast as possible. Dead is the best condition. But if you can't get to dead quick, what do? Because you can't just keep taking all this damage.
Right. Because here's the thing. This is the biggest difference between 4th edition and Pathfinder 2. Okay, we're having a combat. Okay, and it's going to be 4 PCs versus 2 monsters and a mini boss, right? We know how to do this. We could do this any game, right? The 2 monsters might be 2 regular monsters, and then the mini boss is an elite in 4th edition. And in Pathfinder 2, this might be like 2 PL -1s and a PL +2, right? In Pathfinder, in this combat, the players win. But at the end of the fight, all 4 PCs are at 1 hit point. All of them are at 1 hit point. In Pathfinder 2, you just heal to full. Right? You go to full. In 4E, you're going to go to full. But here's the difference. In Pathfinder 2, you went to full. It didn't cost you anything.
Yep.
But in 4E, this party will have spent a ton of their healing surges, which means that they are depleted. Now, it's not a death spiral because they can keep playing. They're at full hit points. They can now go into the next encounter, but they are hurting their ability to get things done.
Right.
Whereas if they went into this same fight and everybody came out pretty much at full, then in Pathfinder 2nd edition, you'd heal to full. But in 4E, maybe 1 or 2 people have to use a healing surge. And it's going to feel like, wow, we did it. We did the thing. We were smart. We played well. I feel like I got rewarded. Because especially if you're out there, if you're hand waving away your heal checks, and it doesn't matter anyways, because the Pathfinder 2nd edition doesn't really support random encounters exactly. If your party sucks and they just make horrible decisions and they all go to like wounded 3, and everybody ends the fight at wounded 3, 1 hit points. And then you go, all right, after the fight, you all heal full.
Yep.
It means that, so it didn't even matter that we sucked. We were going to kill him. I guess the question is, are we all going to die? That's the only thing that's exciting.
That's the question. Is it a TPK or not?
Is it a TPK or not? Whereas in 4th edition, if a party won, you know this, Aaron, we played 4th edition for a long time. If the party won, but everybody at the end of the fight was looking at their hit point values and realizing that they were going to have to spend 2 or 3 surges.
Oh, it would feel bad.
You almost felt like you lost. It was like a Pyrrhic victory.
Ross got hit, he was just like, I'm sorry, guys. I played terrible that fight.
Right. Our wizard was like, if I have to spend a healing surge after a fight, I feel like I've just lost the game. Right.
And there was a degree of truth to that, to be honest, right? And, and again, you gotta be in the mood for this, right. But like this is really emphasizing that team aspect because everyone wanted to do a good job, everyone wanted to play well together with everyone, so they took pride in their performance, and because of that the hours people would spend reading about their characters, learning about the game, trying to think about their next selection when leveling up. It was awesome. Yeah. People were super into it.
I mean, put another way, it's like, because you do not have this resource mechanic in Pathfinder 2nd edition. In Pathfinder 2nd edition, the idea is whether you get an A+ or a D-, you pass the class.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, it's a pass fail.
It's a pass fail.
It's like being in kindergarten.
Yeah, it's like being in kindergarten. Satisfactory, right? Yeah. Like there is no, performance bonus. There is no like incentive to quote unquote play well. Now, in theory, if your GM was a stickler for time, if your GM was somehow using random encounters, or your GM had some algorithm which said, okay, you did this well in this fight, you guys have earned 20 minutes to sit around and heal yourselves, then yes, maybe then the level of performance in the fight would dictate your ability and sort of be a functional reward. But in my experience, nobody plays Pathfinder 2nd edition that way. And quite frankly, the game isn't really particularly well designed to do it.
That's not necessarily fun either, right? I'm not saying you should play it that way. Like it would become a drag.
Right. It would be a drag. So I don't think people should play that way. So yeah, so I think that it's very interesting that, that the way that the healing surges work is it was this great clock tick down mechanic, which never mattered until it did.
Right. Yeah, it mattered a whole hell of a lot. It was kind of like air.
Right. You don't
really think about air till you don't have any.
Exactly. And so but most importantly, Zach, and this is a great point, Zach, none of this diminished your character's ability to contribute meaningfully to the combats. Your character was still going to have their powers, encounter powers, daily powers. So even though you had this healing surge being reduced, it still allowed your character the ability to contribute. But because your healing surges were reducing, it was also a great tool for GMs to use as a way to punish players without hurting their ability to play the game.
Yeah.
Right. Because it meant that you're saying, hey, we want to go here and beat the monster. And you're like, okay, well, you're gonna have to get through several fights. Okay, well, along the way, you lost some healing surges because of a bad check or a skill challenge that you failed. Oh, we lost some healing surges because we fought that undead that drained our life energy. This is affecting our ability to go as far as we want, but it doesn't affect our ability to play the game.
Yeah, and that's huge. And I just want to reiterate that because I don't know if everyone really got that. Like, you could lose healing surges in multiple ways, and a very common one was like a skill challenge. And that's a loss. If you're losing like 1d3 healing surges because you guys screwed up a skill challenge, that's bad.
I mean, in a way, we talked about this before we went live. I mean, in a way, Aaron, like healing surges were almost kind of a narrative mechanic.
Yeah.
In a way,
I mean, you use it certainly as like a narrative currency. I mean, the dungeon master would, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
That's I'm going to hit him hard with that, right? Oh, you got hit by that trap. I'm going to have that trap drain a healing surge, right? So.
Or like you could do, like I could imagine a thing where it's like, Rich said, didn't we lose surges traveling through some soul sucking plane where I had to drag everyone through? Yes,
that is correct.
That was
he literally dragged the entire party through because the rest of us were exhausted.
Everyone else was like unconscious and exhausted. Yeah. It was like a desert on the plane of shadow, on the Shadowfell.
That Rich is our dwarven fighter.
Yeah.
So.
But like
he had the surges to make it.
Yeah, exactly. He had enough surges. But like the other thing about it is like it's an interesting concept because it allows you to pace out the play, and people feel bad when their healing surges are low, but it doesn't actually affect their ability to play the game. And it feels meaningful to lose them in that context. And in fact, like I said before, like healing surges are very much an abstract concept. Like you could have a skill challenge where it's like, your character is embarrassed and loses healing surge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Because we've already established that like hit points are such a vague concept of,
it's not how much
belief and willpower. And it's not just blood and guts.
Yeah. Healing surges is the same concept. It's how much, resolve do you have? How much will you have? People have mentioned stamina in the chat. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now,
the good news is Pathfinder 2 kind of has this.
They do. I don't think it's as good, but they have it, and it's not terrible.
It's not terrible.
It more than I do.
I liked it more than you did. But yeah, Pathfinder 2 in the GMG has as the stamina system, which uses resolve, which is kind of like healing surges. The difference is that you still also have hit points.
So it's more like Star Wars Saga Edition in a way.
Yes.
And what I didn't like about it is, in 4th edition, it's just you heal and you use a healing surge. With the resolve system in Pathfinder 2, you have hit points and you have stamina, and there's only certain ways.
It was clunky.
It was a little clunky.
Right. I mean, the nice thing about hit points is it's like, and healing surges is you get the best of both worlds, and it just kind of combines into one thing. It's like, look, one of the reasons we're using hit points is because it's a nice shorthand. But it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I mean, it works out really well. And again, there are elements of it there in Pathfinder 2nd edition, and I wish that they had embraced those more fully. John says, if 4E is this perfect, then why are you using Pathfinder 2 for the community sandbox game instead of this? Well, we do joke all the time that season 3 of a 4th edition. Well, John, the answer is actually quite simple. Number one, Pathfinder 2 is an exquisitely well-designed game, has a ton of support, and it's very popular. Number two,
has a ton of ongoing support too.
Pathfinder 2 is a live active game that hasn't been buried by its public company, and all the rules are free, and it's really, 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 really well supported by Foundry VTT. So Pathfinder 2nd edition is by far the absolute best choice to make for any sort of online game because it has the best VTT support via Foundry, pretty much bar none, and that makes it the ideal game for that being.
And you got new books coming out all the time, and in my opinion, I don't know, I have to see if this is true, but I think it's true. every core book that's come out has been better than the last one. So like the game continues to grow
for the most part. I mean, again, I'm very excited about these re-releases. I hope they take.
I think the re-releases are gonna be great. Yeah. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So, but
I also say, I love 4E, but I also love a lot of games. I love 3, right? 4E is not a perfect game. I think there are amazing lessons to be learned, particularly in how they designed it. And I would encourage game developers to steal more from 4E, but still the right things from 4E. Right. That's what really a lot of this passion is look what these guys did and how they did it. That was a good mentality. Say what you will about the implementation. Their approach was fucking spot on. More people should think like that in terms of game design and actually treat these role-playing games as games,
right?
Because they are games,
right?
Like, you can't ignore that. Like it's a core component. And make no mistake, right? Even like you look at things like Root and Avatar, they are games. They have mechanics that you do things with,
right? Very much so.
Very much a game, right? And they're better because of it. I think when you get into the wishy-washy, and I think 5e and PF2 both suffer from this. You lose the definition, you lose that focus, and that's where people trip up.
Right. They're trying to be kind of everything and nothing at the same time, right? Like they don't want to be like this, full, fully stanced thing.
I think it suffers because of that.
I agree. And again, like you were saying about, don't half-ass one thing, or don't half-ass two things, whole-ass one thing.
Whole-ass one thing, yeah. Actually, I'm wearing my Swanson shirt today.
Yeah, so. There you go. 4E, when we would run into problems with 4E, GM Scott,
do you have a message, or are you just like?
Oh no, it was to get our $50 holy shit it's Smith super chat goal.
Oh, thank you.
Well, hey, listen, we beat the super chat goal, but not the regular tip goal. That is definitely that blue rectangle is classic. Very nice, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you, Jim Scott.
I think you guys need to show 40 some more love, though. Just saying. I mean, I appreciate the tips, but
he couldn't just do 87 cents. Yeah, I think there's a minimum of $1. I think that's what it is. The thing about it is like, we would run into problems with 4th edition D&D is when we would suddenly start looking at a situation and go, oh man, I want to use this clever idea and this kind of bullshit idea.
Yeah,
and I want to fill this barrel full of ball bearings, and then I'm going to roll it down the stairs, and then that should just kill everybody instantly, right? And like, there is no reason in the game why you couldn't do that. The same way that there's no reason why you couldn't do that in 3rd edition or 2nd edition or 1st edition. There's absolutely nothing that would prevent a GM from saying like, the players are like, hey, GM, we're going to create this ultimate ambush and we're going to go. And the GM goes, yeah, that's awesome. Everybody get plus 20 to attack. Like, you crushed them. Oh my God, it's just disturbing how much you're killing them. You could absolutely do that. The reason why we would run into problems like that is because sometimes that's how we want to play.
Right.
But then you look at 4E and you go, well, why did we pick all these feats and powers?
What are we doing? And to be clear,
if we're going to just roll barrels full of
games,
whatever,
are so nebulous. I think a little bit of that is fine every now and then. I think a little bit of that's fine in PF2 too, because you could say the same argument about PF2.
Yes.
Why are we playing PF2? We could just roll a barrel of explosives down and kill everyone. That's a great question. Right. But I think those can be the good moments. And it's one of those things where there's no great answer. As a game master, you got to read the room. You got to know your table. If this is going to be like a kind of one and done thing and it's really cool and everyone just needs to chill out that night, yeah, let it happen, have fun, and don't worry about it. If you got people who are just looking to exploit, not play the game, that's when you have a conversation where you're like, okay, guys, are we just not in to tactical mini combat? Like, do you guys want to play some BX? Do we want to play something else where this is cool? Like, it's always about conversation, because the thing about these games that really make them hard, we said this at the beginning of the stream, this game was something we played every Friday night for 2.5 to almost 3 years, the same game. And don't get me wrong, if I was going to play a D20 game that long, it would be 4th edition, because at least you got the different tiers and you got a lot of things going on and the game changes. But that's still a long time for basically the same game.
Right.
You're going to get bored. You're going to want to do something different. That's okay. Take breaks, man. Mix it up. Change it up. You can always come back. There's not a lot of saying you can't come back to that campaign.
Right.
Hell, take a night off and play a board game.
Right. Although, to be fair, quick shout out to Mike T. He tipped 187 because he couldn't stand seeing that odd number and he wanted it to be even. Due to his OCD. Thank you, Mike T. Appreciate it. If anybody else has any sort of OCDs about
52 isn't really a round number
about unfilled tip goals, feel free to use the Stream Elements tip. But like, if people aren't enjoying the game, it's fine to just end it too. Like,
100%. I'm just saying, like, you can enjoy the campaign and not want to play that night.
Right. Because let's be honest with ourselves. I'm not, 4th edition is not the case, but how many campaigns have we finished that we were done with, but we were like, we've come too far and we should, we need to grind it out and finish it.
Yeah. Way too many.
Too many is the answer. Right.
Too many is the answer. Because you shouldn't do that.
You shouldn't do that. But
you shouldn't do that ever.
Creative Role-Playing says 4th edition is a huge part of the evolution of role-playing games. I think PF2 has taken good parts of 4E and built on it. 5E was a de-evolution. I actually agree with that.
I agree with that.
With finances driving it more than improving games. Yeah, actually I agree with that. In fact,
I agree with all that.
I actually completely agree with all that. I think Pathfinder 2nd edition, there are things that I would like to see them do more of and lean into more of. But I think
I actually want them to steal more from 4E.
I wanted them to steal more from 4E. But they did steal some good stuff, and I really do appreciate that they stole that. I think 5E did not. 5E was absolutely a counter-purpose, counter-reactionary, and that didn't. That was bad for us.
Now that being said, the original.
Hold on a second, Smith.
Never ran it. Probably never. Jim
Scott, love the study 4E.
Never ran it. But I did enjoy it quite a bit. It's my kind of noodly nonsense.
So GM Scott, thank you very much for that $25 tip. And again, what GM Scott was saying is that he never got a chance to get 4E to the table. Probably never ran it, but only played it once. But I did enjoy it. It's my kind of noodly nonsense. So played it but never ran it. Look, 4E, if you like cool little, look, the powers are cool. You know what I mean? Like
they're fun, they're cool, they're neat, they're different.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you all. Like, I've played 4th edition. I've played in several Smith 4E campaigns. And I've played in a bunch of Smiths. I've even played in Smith Pathfinder 2 campaign. Like, striking as my fighter in Pathfinder 2, okay, or using double slice. Thank you. It's just not as cool as using Tide of Iron or Comeback Strike or Villain's Menace.
These are so just, I'm looking at them and like, they're, I don't know. They just,
okay.
Oh, this is cool.
Okay. Is this video gamey? Sure. But like, this power here, come and get it, is like, what is it? Level 3 encounter power? Maybe it's level 7. Yeah.
I think
it's level 7. Okay. Look at this. Yeah. Look at this power. Okay. You can use it once per fight. Okay. It is a martial power. You need to be using a weapon. It takes your action for the turn. It is a close burst 3, which means it targets all enemies within 3 squares of your character. Out. So it's 3 squares out. It's more like a square than a circle. Because 4E, again, it picks speed.
Circles don't work on grids.
Yeah, circles don't work on grids. You tell me what a fireball looks like. It's ridiculous, right? No. Anyways, target each enemy that you can see. Effect. Notice we have not made any dice rolls yet. We have not made any dice rolls. So you target them and then it works. They must shift 2 squares towards you and end adjacent to you. And a target that wouldn't end adjacent to you doesn't move. Then you attack all the creatures around you.
So you draw them in.
You literally move into a group of enemies. You draw them all into you. You spin around or spin and hack around, targeting all of them, attacking all of them. And because you're targeting them, you're a fighter, you mark every single one of them, so now every single one of those monsters has a penalty to attack anybody else that isn't you.
They're next to you, and you're the fighter, so if they try to leave, you get to whack them.
Also, fighters get a bonus to their attack of opportunity. Everybody gets attack of opportunity in 4th edition. But when a fighter uses an attack of opportunity in 4th edition, if they hit you, your turn is basically over. Yep. So, like...
As if you're the defender and you have this power and your friends are getting ganged up on and you use this, how amazing does that feel?
Right. And you get to do this every fight if you want to.
Every fight.
And be clear, there might be fights where this just never comes up and you don't get a chance to use it. But most of the time, if you have a reason to, if you're fighting a bunch of monsters. Also, we didn't. It's 9 o'clock, so we're going to cover this one last thing before we do part, which is minions.
It's minions just so good.
4E has the idea of a minion, and all games have this, right?
Minions, elites, and solos. Such good design.
Weak monsters that are kind of like mooks, chaff, the minions of the bad guy that run in. 4th edition, though, gamified this and gave them 1 hit point. Because, again, we understand that hit points are an abstraction. The reason we give them 1 hit point is so that we can say any amount of damage kills them. That's what we're doing.
Yep.
And so
direct damage, to be clear.
Direct damage. And so what that means is that a fighter can run into the middle of a group of minions, 4 or 5 of the villain's little hench people, and go, come and get it. And they come in, and then he just goes, kill, 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 and just feels
slaughter,
just like a badass. Awesome. But the other thing is,
and just to be clear, when we say minions, like, understand their hit points are lower. These guys will still tear you up. They do level appropriate damage. These are not like PL -4s in Pathfinder where they're not going to hit you. They're going to hit.
Right.
And if a bunch of minions focus fire, they'll drop a controller. No problem.
But at the same time, when you take that power, you're not taking Griffin's Wrath. Oh, we got a tip.
Tip $10. Are the fortune cards something that should be stolen from 4E?
No, the fortune cards were horrible.
I'm trying to remember these. Some supplement that had this, right?
No, fortune cards were the Magic the Gathering style collectible packs that you would buy, and it would just have random effects that would like give your character bonuses for you spending money. It was literally like microtransactions before microtransactions were a thing. Those were horrible and clearly an attempt to modify a game, and in a very horrible way. That being said,
we didn't play with those.
We did not play with those. Yeah, I only bought a couple of them. But yeah, like I was saying, like if you come and get it, you're not taking Griffin's Wrath, and Griffin's Wrath does more damage to it, but it only does it to a single creature. But then it also gives that creature a penalty to armor class. So it's better for probably setting up that one foe to be taken out by the rest of your party.
Yeah, single target. This is great to drop on an elite or solo because now your party members are going to be able to wail on it quicker. This is a tough decision to make because you get one of these.
You only get one of these. GM Scott says, and that's only just 7th level. You don't have to wait until max level to get a cool power.
This is heroic tier. This isn't like insane epic tier where you're like coming back from the dead mid-turn and then killing everything.
Right.
Which is a power.
Which is a power. Yeah.
I will say,
and so
to
again,
GM Scott and to other people who are interested, I'm going to do a little plug for our Discord here. On the Discord, we have a 4th edition channel where for a period of 3 months, I basically went through all the 4E Dragon magazines and did a deep dive on all that. You can read it if you really want to dig into the lore. I don't recommend it. That's really nerdy, but more interesting. We have a great 4E community. A lot of people on our Discord are super interested in it. We have, I want to say, about 2 community games that are running every now and then, but there's
2 active community games. Of 4th edition.
Of 4th edition. But there's always interest in it. So I'm not going to come out and say it's the best place to 4E because I just don't know. There is a 4E dedicated Discord, but I will say that if you want to play with people who really like it and learn a lot about it and play other things like Pathfinder 2, it's a great Discord to get games on. So
yeah,
something to think about if you're interested.
That's www.patreon.com/Knights of Last Call. Check us out. It's pretty sweet. I recommend. So yeah, couple of things I want to say here. Full Metal Dragon says 1/4E house rule I'd like to try is to let players use daily powers more often, but an additional use cost of 2 healing surges at only once per encounter. Aaron, I know you've done something similar like that in the past, right?
So go back to where we were talking before about how the controller doesn't want to spend healing surges and the defender does. We also like to give other characters a carrot where like defenders could other characters could recover their daily uses by spending a healing surge.
Right.
So you didn't want to lose them in the fight. You wanted to spend them.
Right. If you played well and got to keep your dailies, if you played well and got to keep your healing surges, now you can choose to spend that resource on giving yourself more firepower. But you're also at the same time on your own, from your own cause, you're ratcheting up the tension because you're basically saying, I'm that much closer to being out, right? To being empty, to having run out of firepower.
But that's the thing about healing surges. It's so great. It's such a fun tension mechanic for the players and DMs to play with. You can do so much with it. So many, I don't even want to call them hacks. It's just very intuitive what you can do with this system.
Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of briefly touch about this. I was trying to get to this before 9 o'clock, but the other thing
we knew this was going to run late. You and I both are on talking about 4E.
So I just think the idea of the minion is such a good idea, and to a certain extent as well in 4E, there's the idea of the elite and the solo. And what I just want to talk about this at a high level, because 5E it tried to do the solo with legendary resistance and legendary actions.
Even then, it didn't have the tag.
Yes. So the key thing that we have to understand here is that 4E fundamentally is designed as a squad-based skirmish game. Okay? So what that means is the default assumption of the game is that 5 PCs are going to fight 5 monsters. That's the default assumption of the game. And if you fight 5 foes versus 5 PCs, you are playing 4E correctly. Now, 4E, like Pathfinder 2nd Edition, introduced the idea that you would add level to your character's stats and abilities. Monsters got this too. Now, in Pathfinder 2, it's 1-to-1. For every level, you add 1. In 4th Edition, it was every 2 levels, you added 1. So you have a little bit wider of a scale in 4th Edition. But long story short, if you threw, a higher level monster at your party because you wanted a tougher challenge, we do this in Pathfinder 2nd Edition all the time, right? In PF2, we'll throw a PL +3 or a PL +4 for an extreme fight. That monster is tough because its stats are so much higher. That's what makes it able to stand up 1 versus 5 or 1 versus 4.
Most people would say just because it's tougher in this way, it's not more interesting. It's not more engaging. It's
right.
tedious.
And to be clear, the monster that you're using, you could have just pulled that monster out of the bestiary. It's just, it's a troll. It's a coatol. It's a, ogre boss. Like, it's whatever you want to pull out of the boss. It's not designed to be a single creature, but its stats are so much higher than the rest of the party members, it's going to function that way. And to be clear, they did it. The math in Pathfinder 2 checks out, and it does work. But the problem is, it's boring.
Melissa
because
tipped $3.
I
was thinking of using the healing surge from 4E as something else for my players to use the action points on.
I was thinking of using the healing surge from 4E as something else to spend action points on.
Do you mean like spend an action point to gain a healing surge, or using a healing surge like an action point?
Because using healing surge as an action point is also kind of cool.
That's kind of cool. I like that.
I mean, it's a little powerful, probably.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of action points per day.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if you make it like 2 or something, I don't know. Like, that would be kind of powerful. Uh-oh, Smith, the old microphone disconnect. So while he's out, I can talk. So the Pathfinder 2 works by having the monster have these higher stats. And unfortunately, that means that you might need something like a 15 to hit that boss, or that boss hits you on a 3 or higher. It works mechanically, but it's just not particularly interesting, right? So what 4E did is it used these classifications of minions, elites, and solos. And quite frankly, all it did, I think you might be back, Smith.
Hello.
Yep, there you are. I said before, the default encounter in 4th edition was 5 PCs versus 5 monsters. Well, really simple. A solo, and by the way, that means if the PCs were level, say, 6, then they would fight 5 level 6 monsters. What if you wanted to fight one big monster? Well, you could throw a level 10 monster at them. Sure, but that level 10 monster is going to have really high armor class and really high attack rolls. It's going to be hitting them all the time, and they're going to be missing a lot. That doesn't really sound fun. So what 4th edition gave us this tool is instead of fighting 5 level 6 monsters, we could fight 1 level 6 solo monster. This was a game tag. This was a monster that was designed for the stats for a level 6 party, but given the extra hit points and, more importantly,
the extra powers
and abilities that allowed it to function as a sort of multi-dimensional threat. And it could, have a big AoE, and it had a breath weapon, and it had the ability to do multiple reactions a turn. It wasn't just some random higher level monster that you are now expecting to fill the role of being a fun and entertaining 1 versus 5 fight. It is a monster that is mechanically designed to be interesting to fight 1 versus many without resorting to giving the creature a really, really, really high AC and really, really, really high saves, where it basically saves and passes everything. Because that's also that's definitely what Pathfinder 2 did, but in a way that's what 5th edition did with Legendary Resistance. Yes. They just said, well, it'll just pass all the saves all the time.
Well, in 5th edition too, it's got bounded accuracy, so their entire scaling progression is based off hit points. So you want to have a harder fight, it's a higher level creature, which you're still going to hit, but it's just got a wall of hit points and doesn't specifically have special abilities, unless it's one of those creatures that happen to have legendary resistance. But again, they don't have the solo tag, so you don't have that specific design intention the way you do here, where this creature, this solo, has multiple action points. It's going to interrupt your turn. It's going to have reactions to stop you from moving. It's designed to deal with 5 adversaries at the same time.
Right. And to be fun and interesting and dynamic to do so. And on the flip side, you have the minion. Because there's a desire in Pathfinder 2, there's a desire in any game. I want my party to fight 30 dudes. I want them to be fighting this really cool this iron golem, and then there's like a bunch of like ghostly spirits that are sort of trapped in all the sarcophagi start coming out while they're fighting this like coffin golem or something like that, right? That sounds awesome. But the problem is you could use lower level monsters. In Pathfinder 2, I could throw monsters that are 4 levels below the party. I think those only cost 10 XP or 5 XP or something out of the budget. But we all know what's going to happen. They're never going to hit. They're not a threat. And also, annoyingly, they have low hit points, and the party will crit them a lot, but sometimes they won't. Sometimes they'll hit them, and now you have to track their hit points. Also, you're a level 12 party. So you're pulling out, 10, 12, level 7 monsters? These aren't goblin warriors. These are full statted, complex as shit level 7 monsters. And you're now fighting 12 of them, and they all have all these abilities? Because in Pathfinder,
which all will miss.
Which will all miss anyways. You can do it, but you shouldn't do it. And I've said this before, unfortunately, and I'll say it again. I think Pathfinder 2 works best if you use PL -2 to PL +2 monsters. Yep. I think once you go above party level of 2, once you go to party level 3 or 4, the monsters' hit points and armor class and its attack bonuses and saves are so high it becomes uninteresting. And if they're below party level -2, so if they're 3 levels lower, 4 levels lower, 5 levels lower, they're so ineffective it's kind of pathetic. Yeah. But minions were expressly designed to be 3 things. 1, killable. They had 1 hit point. And again, that's not to be like, well, that's stupid. What does that mean in the simulation? Hit points don't mean anything in any simulation. All this means is that they die when they are hit once.
You can't go to the doctor and figure out how many hit points you have.
Right. Number 2, they're designed to be simple. Minions never had complex stat bone. Like, they were very small, they typically did 1 thing, and that's it.
I think there was a level 28 minion in an adventure that had maybe a recharge.
Yes, there was there was some aspect of like ghosts of Vecna,
something of Orcus
or something. Yeah, but again, that's level 28. It's the end of the game. I guess I'll give them a pass. And then most importantly,
epic minion.
The third thing is the math was balanced so that these things were still scary. They obviously were not as powerful as a normal monster, but a level 6 minion was much more of a threat to you than, let's say, a level 2 normal creature would be, right? Even though this was like 1 hit point creature and it's a minion, it was designed to have this kind of power and ability.
In PF2 terms, a minion would still be an on level, so PL0 creature that just had 1 hit point. Meaning you still had to roll to hit them, and they could certainly hit you, and they were going to do damage, and it was going to hurt you.
Yeah. Mike. Oh, Mike finished out our goal.
There is no message. Only Zool.
There is no message, only Zool.
Oh, wow. Thank you for the 4E love. It deserves it. We
got
a bad rap.
Also, congrats. Thank you, Mike, for tipping. That's very, very, very nice of you. And we definitely like the 4E love. So I think that R.I.P. Turd Ferguson. Creative role playing, another great example. Minions are also made area effect damage so much more valuable. Absolutely. I mean, without getting into it, we'll get into it. All right. Here's the problem.
Clock stream, everyone.
No. Here's the problem, right? The problem is that if you make a spell, okay, like Fireball, okay, it's an AoE, right? AoE, this is your Fireball spell.
It's a square in 4E.
Oh, yeah, it's true. It is a square in 4E, okay? But, like, if you make your spell in, like, Fireball, like in Pathfinder 2, and you make it do something like 2d6 points of damage per level, it has to do that because it has to be competitive. It has to scale. It has to be scary. Because what is making that Fireball powerful is the damage. You know that. You dropped some pretty sick Fireballs last Friday, Smith. But in 4E...
Got some sweet crits, too, by the way.
In 4E, something like a Fireball could literally just do 2d6 damage. Not 2d6 per level. It could just do 2d6 damage. But because of minions and the fact that even though they only have 1 hit point, it still takes an attack to kill a minion. So character classes like fighters and even rogues who are very dangerous.
I did not want to deal with minions.
A rogue did 100 damage with their attack. They didn't want to attack a 1 hit point minion. It was very inefficient for the strikers to attack minions. So it gave controllers the ability to have these area of effect spells, like a wizard with a fireball. Now, the fireball didn't do a lot of damage, but it still felt amazing because it would just wipe out entire swaths of the fight, but somehow leave all of the rest of the monsters kind of untouched because it just didn't really do that much damage. The strikers had to deal with the elite monsters and the regular monsters. The controller couldn't really do damage unless he was doing it to minions. And that was such an interesting component of the game. I think a lot of players slept on using a lot of minions. We use minions all the time.
Yeah.
Like I almost always would sprinkle in at least like 5 or 10 minions in almost every fight.
And if you weren't ready for them, they would.
Anonymous tipped $5.
Oh, we got a big long tip here.
Off for the night. I understand why some fans don't like 4E for its game-like stricter, but the way that a lot of those fans articulate those criticisms always sounds very trivial and silly. Have a good night, y'all.
Thank you for that, Anonymous. I don't know if you meant to sign off there as Anonymous, but
I agree with all this.
Yeah, I agree with all. I mean, that is absolutely true. It is not a perfect game, but it absolutely has some incredibly valuable lessons. Oh, it was Jonka. Okay, well, thank you, Jonka.
Thank you, Jonka.
It has some incredibly valuable lessons that we should learn from. And people definitely threw the baby out with the bathwater. And most of the people who criticize about 4E probably never played it or they played it wrong.
and not to get into this because this could be a whole other thing and it's already late. But understand too, the hell someone just happened to your screen.
Oh,
we're like little boxes now.
I moved my Zoom window.
No, come back. There we go. It's getting there.
No, that's not it.
Now we're too big. Too small. I feel like I'm building a 5e encounter right now. There we go. All right,
there we go.
There was some politics and money involved with this. You gotta understand the 3E market was huge. It was so bloated. If you went to Gen Con or Origins during that time frame, there was so much 3E crap out there. The market was just massively saturated. And in some ways, this was good because, wow, what a great time for role-playing games. What a boom. In some ways, it was garbage because, holy shit, yet another 3E Dungeons and Dragons clone, right? And so 4E came out, and WotC does what WotC does, which again, to some degree, I think they had a right to, because
it wasn't selling.
Huh?
I mean, it wasn't selling. I mean, they had a right to.
Yeah, they have a right to protect their property, and they have a right to go, hey, listen, we kind of want to make sure that people don't just steal our game, right? In fourth edition. And there was a huge third-party market out there that basically we're like, we're gonna lose our income if this game is successful. And so there was certainly a driven campaign that was influenced by money to help drive this game down. And just to be clear, I'm not saying the game was perfect. It certainly had its flaws, and its marketing was possibly some of the worst I've seen until some of the more recent 5e D&D Next marketing that recently came out. That's pretty bad too. But the 4E reveal video was one of the all-time worst videos ever. So there was definitely problems with it, but some of this was deliberately orchestrated because, like everything, there was money on the line, and people liked getting that 3E money.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
It was a huge secondary market.
Yeah. John says, as one of those 4E haters, I am willing to try it to see all of this fun that you're so passionate about, but I still don't think it'll change my opinion on it being too Nintendo. John, you are absolutely right. Nintendo, I mean, if by video game, if you mean like a game, you are absolutely right.
It's a game.
4E is a system that is trying to gamify the experience of playing D&D, both combat and out of combat with things like skill challenge. It wants playing the game, the actual manipulation of your characters and your dice, and making those decisions to be part of the core experience of the game. And in a sense, that is like a video game because video games are games. If what you like about role-playing games is very unstructured play, very realistic play that is trying to simulate, if you want a core mechanic which is dispassionate and unbiased, and you say, well, nope, this monster's level 10, you're level 2, it's just going to kill you all, and that's the monster that you're here to fight, and if you want to go this way, that's the monster you got to fight. Then it is not a good game for that.
No.
Right. That's just,
it's not trying to be.
And that's the other thing. That's the mistake we made when we were younger, right? We tried to make it all these things, and it wasn't. We weren't in that mind space yet, that it sort of evolved mind space where the idea that we could play multiple games ever occurred to us, right?
And I want to be clear. Some people consider that like a flaw. I don't. Like the game is very deliberate in what it's trying to do. And if you don't want to do that, that's totally okay. Some days I want to play an FPS. Some days I want to play RPG. Some days I want to play a farming simulator. I don't want to have them all in the same thing at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Like, I absolutely believe that if we were in a situation where it's like every week, we were playing, or maybe 4 times a week, 4 times a month, we were playing some super political Dune game. I would want to have like a twice a month 4E game or Pathfinder 2 game, to get tactical, to use minis, to count squares, right? Because that's what's missing in those other games.
Honestly, that's the dream. Just play more games. That's the best advice we'll ever give on this channel. Play more games.
Right. Exactly. Just play more games. Let me see. I saw something here. The minion rules were so good. I think I miss them so much. I tried to create minion rules for because technically there's a minion type, right, in Pathfinder 2, which is used for like when you're controlling a summons, and the idea is that like it can never get more than 2 actions and whatever. My idea for minions in Pathfinder 2nd edition was you'd have to figure out the XP budget, but the idea was a level 7 minion would have level 7-ish stats, right? But it would only have 1 hit point, but it would only get 2 actions, not 3, and it wouldn't have any reactions, and it would have a 2-action activity that it could do. So like basically it could move and attack. It could attack twice. Or if like it was in combat with you, it could do that 1-2 action, mega punch or something like that to make maneuvering and a lot more important. Like if you're being surrounded by a bunch of minions, it's easy to move away from them, but it keeps the players moving around the battlefield. If they ever stand still, they're suddenly going to get, surrounded and sort of attacked. And the other reason I wanted to put minions into Pathfinder 2 is there's so many instances. Like, for example, if you crit with a lightning rune, an electric rune in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, the damage from your lightning rune arcs to another target within 10 feet. Well, the damage from your lightning rune is only like D6 or 2D6 damage. It's nothing. It's not going to kill anybody. But if you were playing with 1 hit point minions, it would, the lightning would crash out and lock and crash into somebody. Did you unplug your microphone again, you son of?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, badly.
Yeah, the thing broke. The plug broke.
All right. Well, I guess that's our sign, people. All right. Did the plug break in the microphone?
Yes.
Oh, so we'll have to fix that on Friday.
We'll just find your cable. Actually, we'll just get this cable.
Oh, you know what? We'll just get you an XLR cable. Yeah, that's what we need to get. The professional. It's the USB is not really well designed. Good mic, but USB port sucked.
I know you get me on my Mac Pro camera mic, so I'm sure it's super high quality.
Oh, it's very, very high quality. See, and you know what, people? This is why we invest, and this is why we take your tips and your Patreon support, and we try to buy a better equipment, because otherwise everybody will sound like that all the time. DM Gary says Smith will talk 4E until he literally breaks the mic. Yeah, that is absolutely true.
Here we are.
And I'm just seeing some random chats here, but Awesome says, but for some people, encounter power is inherently less realistic or whatever, more gamey feeling. Then here's something that you can use X times per short rest.
Or focus power.
Right. Yeah. You get a focus point. You can use it.
Totally cool. That's so stimulation. It's focus point.
Right. Oh, you can spell strike? Can you spell strike again? No. Why? I have to reload it. What does that mean? What are you reloading it? I'm going to unleash my psyche. Do it. Well, I can't. Why? It's not the 3rd round of combat yet. What? Anyways, again, apologize if we didn't get to all of your cool comments and suggestions. Again, something we were just talking about the other day, Smith. It's like, these are just the beginning of these conversations, right? Because
we're skimming the surface.
Right, because we always then go to the Patreon, we go to our Discord, and that's where we spend the next, 2 or 3 days talking about this, really, really, really getting deep into it. These live streams are just the tips of the iceberg to sort of, have us all be together in one place at one time and have everybody sort of, kind of get intrigued by an idea. But really, if you're interested in deep conversations about Pathfinder 4th edition, Powered by the Apocalypse, 2D20 games, Blaze in the Dark games, new RPGs, there's a
Apollo 13.
Yeah, I mean, there's a million different games. So that is what
it's been hot recently.
What's that?
Journal games.
Oh, journaling games. You mean like Ironsworn?
No, like a degree beyond that, even. So,
the
vampire and
apothecary.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
there's so many games out there. I will say, don't join the Discord if you are shy about spending money and don't have a lot of bookshelf space, because people join and then they are just buying book after book after book.
Right. Or you could be like Ben, who today gave away his Pathfinder 2 book collection so that he had more room, because he doesn't have the room for it. So he bought too many new books.
He budgets his bookshelf space the way most people budget their finances. Exactly. I mean, it's just like,
well, in Ben's case, when it comes to role-playing games, space is limited, budget is not. So
correct.
So again, I mean, 4th edition, you can play it on Foundry. You can still buy the PDFs. They're for sale. You can also find them online sometimes if you want to. You can buy the books pretty cheap on eBay.
Expensive.
Some of the books are expensive. And the Foundry support is there, but it is a little bit tough to get a game going, because it doesn't have a thriving community. So it can be a challenging game. And in some ways, maybe its time has passed. Again, we have 2 community games going on our private Discord, but that's just because we have some pretty big 4E fans. Because quite frankly, I think there's a lot of overlap between 4E and Pathfinder 2nd Edition and the type of game that you enjoy. But I will say, I think there's a lot of ideas there. And I think ultimately, if you're going to buy books and you don't want to play 4th edition, you just want to learn from 4th edition. Aaron showed at the beginning of the stream the Wizards Presents books.
Yes.
And those books those things really show you what it is that they were trying to do with that. And it really talks about the philosophy, not just of the mechanics, but of the game, the world design, the points of light, the whole idea of how do you make a heroic adventuring game work. And I think you could really and by the way, you can buy those on Drive-Thru RPG. We have a link to our Drive-Thru RPG affiliate. If you want to throw some love to us and you want to use our Drive-Thru RPG affiliate link, that'd be awesome. We get a couple percentage points off of that. Doesn't cost you any more money, but we do get a small commission. But if you go to Drive-Thru RPG, they have Wizards Presents Races and Classes, Wizards Presents Worlds and Monsters. They're $5. You can buy a watermark PDF for $5 and take a look at it. And I think both of them are incredible reads.
Yeah.
Flint asked a question. He said, if you had to choose between getting the 4th edition DMG and Player's Guide, I think that means Player's Handbook, or the 4E Rules Compendium.
Well, I would definitely get the Player's Guide if that's what that means. If it's between the DMG and the Rules Compendium, I would get the Rules Compendium.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I think for a Game Master, this is going to be the most mechanically valuable book. That being said, the advice and the Dungeon Master books, and they're all great. The hardback versions are good too. DMG 2 has got some phenomenal advice. It's more aimed at Paragon, but all of them are good. These books are great even if you're not playing 4E, because there's just so much good advice about running Dungeons and Dragons. You can apply it in Pathfinder. You can apply it to any of these D20 games. But in terms of rule asset for the game, it's not going to be as critical as something like this, which literally covers every mechanical rule in the game.
Yeah. I mean, I personally would say I would get Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide.
Yeah, you gotta get the Player's Handbook.
You gotta get the Player's Handbook.
Gotta get the Player's Handbook, and don't get the essential ones to start off with. I know DM Gary's in the chat. He's like, "What's wrong with essentials?" Get the PHP 1 first, and then expand from there. Probably in the PHP 2, which is also a great book.
Right.
Start with these ones, but this one in particular, this is a phenomenal book.
Yeah, PHP 2 is really nice because a lot of times in my experience, with people who are starting the game, people go, "Oh, cool, we're gonna play D&D." I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "I want to play a sorcerer. I want to play a druid. I want to play a barbarian." Those classes aren't in the Player's Handbook 1.
They're in PHP 2.
They're in Player's Handbook 2. So
if you can get both, if not, get PHP 1.
Yeah, but and honestly too, I think some of the PHP 2 classes like the bard and the druid and the sorcerer are just some of my favorite classes.
Totally, they're so cool.
No, DM Gary agrees. He says, "I agree. F the essential books as starting points."
Okay, thank you. Great, I feel good. I would then say get Monster Vault. I would not get MMM 1. I would start with the Monster Vault. This is a great book. The math is you'll hear the math was a little wonky in 4E. Get this book. You don't have to worry about it. The monsters are cool.
Yeah, I think that's the best monster book for 4th edition is Monster Vaults.
And then if you're like, what do I run? I would pick up this beauty.
Yeah.
This is a book that's filled with 30 dungeons, one for every level of the game. They're a little simplistic. They're going to be light on plot. This is a great thing to have. And then, you could build your own campaign. You could look at the different campaign settings if you want. This is just great to have anyway, because if you ever need a gap filled, you can drop one of them in. If you don't know what to do, start with this. They're a lot of fun. They're not just all combats or skill challenges.
No, it's usually it's run like an old RPGA session. Yeah. It's like it's designed for like a 4-hour game session. You're probably going to lose 30 minutes to 45 minutes of just bullshit. And then it's got like 3 to 4 encounters, usually with a couple combats, maybe a skill challenge or 2, and it's it's a pretty interesting little thing.
You got these books right here, which all of these are not any of the expensive ones. This is 3 years of play right here.
Right. Yeah, you can play it for a very long time. And also that dungeon delve contains 30 different mini dungeons. Yep. Each dungeon contains 3 or 4 encounters. Yep. So you have 120 examples of how to build encounters using this system in one book. And it's all self-referential, even if you just use it to learn how to build encounters and maybe just to steal, beg, borrow, file the serial numbers off and use it again. I think it is a fantastic book. Let's see here. DM Gary says, question for you two. One of the things that got bandied about was what to do / how to release the original 3 PHBs was to break it into tiers. PHB would have been all of the classes from the first 3, but just the heroic tiers.
So there was a degree of that in the design. You see that in the Game Master guides, and the Monster Manuals were supposed to do that too, where GMG1 was heroic, GMG2 was Paragon. They never got to GMG3, but it was supposed to focus on the epic level. They wanted to do that with the Monster Manuals, and I guess according to Gary here, the player's handbook. But then obviously they ran into an obvious problem, which is it's going to be years between releases, and people are going to be leveling up and not having anything to do.
Yeah, ultimately, so, I think you got to give people the whole class at release. I mean, that's just the way it works. I mean,
I agree. So I think it worked out okay. I mean, the gap between PHB 1 and 2 wasn't that long, but
yeah, I mean, the idea was they would release one a year.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought it was kind of sweet.
Like they're barbarians, man. I have to tell you.
I mean, I thought it was sweet. Do you think they would have gone over better for the people who are mad about X class not coming out into Player's Handbook 2? I mean, maybe. I mean, the Sorcerer didn't even exist until 3rd edition. So it's like a Barbarian wasn't a class in 2nd edition. Like, these were all relatively new classes. Like, I mean, maybe the Druid, I guess, is the one I could see people being upset about, or maybe the Bard. But like,
I get it. People like to play what they want to play. You see this at PF2, right?
Oh, I know. Like everyone's like, oh, the APG has to basically have we already know what the classes are going to be because they got released in Player's Handbook 1, or sorry, in Pathfinder 1. There has to be a swashbuckler now in Pathfinder 2. Why? We have archetypes. We don't need swashbuckler. Well, it was a class in Pathfinder 1, so it has to be a class in Pathfinder 2.
There are too many classes in PF2 that could just be archetypes.
Yeah. So Frostjack, actually Thursday, we're going to wrap up here. On Thursday, we're going to be doing more Pathfinder 2 talk. You guys have been really supporting us with that. We've been getting really, really great views. We've been really getting a lot of traction, and a lot of people are supporting it, throwing their money. And listen, hey, when you show up, when you like, when you comment, when you subscribe, when you drop a tip, we listen to that. That's the content we're going to give you. We're going to be covering Pathfinder 2 Bards on Thursday, and we've done this for the Rogue. We did it for the Barbarian. We're going to spend the first, 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, kind of talking through the history of how these classes kind of came into the game. And Frostjack, you're absolutely right. The Bard has a very weird history, has been all over the place.
Very weird class.
Very weird class. And so it'll be fun to kind of walk through that with everybody. But we are going to be doing that Thursday. We're going to be talking about the Bard in Pathfinder 2. Some deep dive conversations, folks with the chat, maybe have a guest on to talk about the chat. But all right. Well, no surprise here. We almost went 3 hours on 4E. I'm sure we could talk about it for another 7. But again, you guys really came out. You showed 4E some love. We hit that tip goal. So there will be another 4E stream, sometime here in the future. As long as you all continue to show your love and your support, we will continue to talk about games or ideas or concepts. And we're happy to talk about whatever it is that you all are excited about as well. In addition, leave a comment or join our Patreon so that you can hang out with us and tell us directly what it is that you'd like to see and how often you'd like to see it.
Also, don't forget to hit like, hit the bell, and subscribe.
Ding, ding, yeah. Because we go live Tuesdays and Thursdays, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard. But Sometimes we also throw in a Friday or a Monday or a Wednesday or a Sunday night stream.
Sunday stream.
Yeah, the Sunday night super secret system streams are legendary for if you really want to, have some obscure ass game systems.
Well, we call this the intimate streams because there's 5 people in the channel.
That's true. That's when we have like 20 people. It's nice. Zach says this was really fun. More Smith, please. Well, we also hit that goal, so we'll definitely have Smith on as well. So, Frostjack says, will you touch on the 4E Bard on Thursday? Absolutely, Frostjack. I will start off with the very first instance of the Bard in Dungeons & Dragons, all the way up until 4E and then to Pathfinder 2nd Edition. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And on behalf of Mr. Smith and also the rest of Knights of Last Call, thank you for joining us. And we will see you next time on Knights of Last Call. Peace out, everybody.